The light over King's Landing had shifted since the day Bran the Broken was raised to the throne. Not even a moon's turn had passed, yet the half-rebuilt city already carried a nervous hush, as though it feared to rouse the Dragon Queen's ashes that still clung to the cracks of the Red Keep. At dawn, the new king drifted to the terrace above Maegor's holdfast. Rolled forward by Sir Podrick in the narrow-wheeled chair, Maester Wolkan had refitted with broad ash wheels swaddled in felt. No guards announced him. No herald shouted his titles. Bran Stark simply arrived, young and thin in a doublet of undyed wool, and breathed the salted wind that swept up from Blackwater Bay. He closed his eyes. The world pressed in. Hundreds of gulls crying over charred towers, the harbor lapping at wharves half-melted by dragonfire, a carpenter's hammer clacking on the broken ribs of a galley. Farther off, beyond flesh and brick and sound, Bran sensed the great tangling root web that threaded the Seven Kingdoms. Most of its weirwoods were gone, axed by Andals, burned by Septons. But the deep part of him touched every surviving tree. The old groves of the north, the stunted saplings on the Isle of Faces, the lonely white trunk that lorded over Winterfell's godswood. From those distant eyes he saw summer frost lying pale upon the wall. He tasted the musk of moss under eaves near Riverrun. He heard ravens curving through a gray sky somewhere above the Dreadfort. And farther still, so faint his heart shuddered, he caught a single warm breath in the endless white silence beyond the wall. The breath of a man who had once been a king and now thought himself nothing at all. Jon Dodite. The name brushed Bran's mind like a wingtip. With it came sorrow deeper than the black cells that had held him under King Aerys. Sorrow above crowns and thrones. Bran opened his eyes and looked south instead, to the scorched expanse where the dragon pit had stood. Nothing there stirred. No dragons, no cheers. Only rubble. Only ghosts. Footsteps tapped behind him. Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the King, carried 2 cups and a flagon whose silver shoulders still bore scorch marks from the wildfire he once crafted to burn Stannis Baratheon's fleet. He set the flagon on the balcony's low stone rail, poured, and without a word offered Bran the first cup. Bran did not reach for it. His hands, light and slack upon his lap, made no move. Tyrion flushed, apologized, drank from both cups himself, and tried again. "I had the cellars searched for a vintage worth the name," he said, clearing his throat. 1 cask of Arbor Gold survived, though the cooper swore half the angel's share had flown out through cracks. What remains is better than small clothes rinse. Bran's smile flickered, gone before it took shape. How many petitions await us this morning? 33, at last count. Tyrion leaned beside the flagon. The Guild of Stonemasons demands triple wages. The Faith wants funds to rebuild the Sept of Baelor. Lord Celtigar dares to ask for dragon eggs you don't possess, and the Master of Coin insists we're out of coin. "Tell them we have grain enough for the winter," Bran murmured. "Tell them there will be no new Sept while half the small folk sleep in tents. Tell Lord Celtigar the dragons are gone, and kings who chase bones find only dust." Tyrion sipped. "Those answers will quiet very few, Your Grace." A gull screeched overhead. Far below the city stirred. Clatter of lances, vendors' calls, the clang of hammers against bells newly cast from melted swords. Bran listened until each sound folded into an invisible weave he alone could feel. When he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. "I was crowned to mend a broken realm. Yet the realm will never heal so long as it clutches at the same shard that cut it open. Thrones breed swords, my lord Hand. Swords breed graves. You know this. I know this. The land itself knows." "Man?" Tyrion eyed him sideways. "Do you speak of abolishing the Iron Throne? Hard enough convincing the lords to accept a council. Strip them of the last bauble of power and they'll riot. I speak of naming a king who belongs to the people rather than over them. A king who will walk among them with mud on his boots instead of gold on his cloak." "Whoever could you mean?" The dwarf's smile faltered. "Please, no riddle. I am freshly recovered from last night's council." Bran's fingers slid along the armrest, searching for warmth it never found. "Jon Snow. The last male of the blood of the dragon and the wolf. He never asked to rule, therefore he is fit to rule." Tyrion set both cups down. Outside the wall seabirds circled, oblivious, but the air between the king and his hand thickened dangerously. "My liege," Tyrion said at length, "you are speaking treason against yourself." Bran's head tilted, curious. If a king cannot renounce a crown freely given, is it a crown or a fetter? And if the fetter is forged of blood and duty, which of us is free? Nah. Tyrion folded his arms, rocked on his heels, and stared into the broken city whose rebuilding he had been commanded to oversee. He thought of wildfire glinting green in the bay, of chains pulled taut across water, of bells ringing while dragonflame melted flesh. He thought of Daenerys Targaryen's last breath and of the dagger Jon slid through her heart. No song would ever be sweet enough to drown that memory. "What do you require of me?" he asked softly. Bran answered the question Tyrion had not voiced. "You will raise no banners. No lord shall rally. No crowd will know. I will go north in a modest train carrying gifts to Winterfell. When I cross its gate, I will kneel to Jon, and in the sight of the old gods and the new, I will name him king of all the people of Westeros." Tyrion tried to laugh. It rasped out like a hinge long unoiled. "Jon hardly considers himself one of those people, let alone their king. He rode beyond the wall 5 days past. Where he leads, we cannot follow." Bran's eyes glazed for a heartbeat, distant and silver as cold moonlight. "He waits at the Shadow Lake. Tormented giantsbane traps trout for him. They speak of building cottages on the green slope." "Nice to know. Even if we could fetch him," Tyrion said, rubbing his brow, "you know what his first word would be?" "No." He looked up sharply. Grey Worm would return. The Unsullied may have sailed, but their vows bind them to vengeance. The armies of the Reach, the Vale, the Stormlands, do you think they will kneel so easily to the man who killed their breaker of chains? Bran turned his face back to the sea. "I trust in the roots beneath the soil. They have felt worse storms, and still they thrive." Then down. The seagulls wheeled once more and vanished behind the tower. Bran wheeled too, Podrick guiding him without command back beneath the stone archway. Tyrion lingered a moment, staring at the empty terrace, then poured the remaining arbor gold onto the flagstones where it soaked into mortar blackened by dragonfire. The Raven arrived in Winterfell at dusk 3 days later, its legs heavy with twin scrolls sealed in dark green wax. Sansa Stark, Lady of the North, fed the bird-corn herself, stroked its sable feathers, and dismissed the maester before she cracked either seal. Her solar hung with tapestries of direwolves and snow-capped mountains, yet a film of smoke-stained sunlight crept through the arrow slit, painting every thread the color of dying embers. The first scroll bore Tyrion's careful hand, a maze of courtesy, apology, and half-truths. The second was shorter by far, written in an ink so pale it seemed bled of life. "I am coming home. B." Sansa set the scroll in firelight and watched the letters vanish into shadow. She did not smile. Bran's procession parted the Riverlands like a knife through shallow frost. His wheelhouse was canvas, plain and gray, drawn by 2 ponies instead of the team of matched bays the master of horse had proposed. Behind rolled a single covered wagon bearing seed, grain, and a chest of dragonglass arrowheads quarried from Dragonstone's obsidian veins. 5 knights of the Kingsguard rode escort, though none were white cloaks of old. Ser Brienne of Tarth led, her armor still dented at the shoulder where the hound's axe once nicked her. Beside her rode Ser Robin Ryswell, lean and silent, and behind came Ser Govena Chat, Ser Maris Mertens, and Ser Garibald the Quiet, whose vow of silence matched the king's own stillness. Small folk along the gold road bowed not out of awe, but out of habit. A hunched woodcutter offered Bran a single red apple. An orphan girl with hair like cornstalks pressed wildflowers through the wheelhouse curtain and vanished again. No crowds thronged the roadside, no songs followed them. When night fell, they camped without pavilion, Bran's chair drawn near the fire so he could feel its pulse. He spoke little, ate less, and while his nights drifted to slumber, he gazed at stars obscured by passing clouds. Sometimes his eyes rolled white, and ravens flapped overhead, tracing circles like black leaves caught in wind. Ser Brienne kept watch. More than once she saw Bran's pale lips move though no sound issued. On those nights she thought of Catelyn Stark's last scream at the twins, remembered the bite of rain on her skin when she knelt beside a corpse bound and weighted by stones, and wondered whether any oath ever truly ended. On the 5th night out of King's Landing, before they reached the ruins of Stony Sept, Bran summoned Brienne with a lift of 2 thin fingers. Podrick steadied the chair as she knelt. "You served my mother with faith," Bran said. "Will you serve her sons likewise, though their paths diverge?" Brienne bowed her head. "I am yours, your grace." "I am but a tree's shadow," he whispered, "and the shadow grows thin. When I travel beyond the wall, you will stay at Winterfell. Guard my sister. Guard the North. Guard the realm's memory if all else fails." Brienne's blue eyes shone wet. "Your grace speaks as though he rides to his death." "All men ride there, sir." He touched her steel-clad hand with his limp one, and though the pressure was no stronger than a falling leaf, Brienne felt it through every plate. "Remember, whatever comes, that I chose the path freely." Jon Snow awoke to Ghost's muzzle brushing ice from his cheek. The direwolf's red eyes caught the dawn in their mirrored depths, reflecting a sky alight with ribbons of violet and rose. Beyond the beast's shoulder the shadow lake lay smooth as polished obsidian, only the faintest mist curling across it. Somewhere upslope, a man chopped kindling. Each thud echoed through thin, bitter air. Jon rose from the bed of pine boughs, his breath fogging. Tormund Giantsbane hailed him with a laugh that startled a flock of gray-winged ducks from the reed bank. "You sleep like a crow stuffed with feathers," the wildling roared, swinging his axe into a fresh log. "Come, Snow, I've gid worms sharper than you look." Jon's smile was weary, but real. The hut they'd built was little more than a ring of stones roofed by spruce branches, yet it was shelter, and shelter was a gift. He knelt to feed the embers of last night's fire, coaxing flame through a crumble of birch bark. Ghost settled beside him, watchful. "You dream loud," Tormund said, slicing wood into lengths. "Hear you calling a name. Which woman this time? Queens? Witches?" He winked, lewd and sharp-toothed. "Or maybe that red-haired sister of yours?" Jon flinched. "I have no sisters." Tormund snorted. "You've half the Southron kingdom for kin, Snow. Doesn't mean they'll ride this far to peel blisters off your feet." Hefting a wicker creel, Jon crossed to the water's edge. Trout flashed silver beneath the surface. He cast a line of braided horsehair baited with blue-striped grubs, and settled on a fallen trunk, boots creaking. Behind him Tormund talked of beavers downstream and elk sign in the high pass, but Jon paid little heed. He watched light crawl across the lake until it crowned the far ridge, gilding the mist into banners of fire. Each breath he drew tasted of pine, cold, and the faint tang of distant smoke. "Smoke?" Ghost bristled. Jon rose, scanning the tree line. A soft plume curled beyond a stand of larches, too pale to be campfire. Tormund's laughter died. "You expecting guests, Crow? If I were, they wouldn't come by road." Jon loosed the trout, left the creel, and reached for Longclaw where it lay sheathed across the hearthstones. He stroked the pommel wolf's head, its pale stone eyes, smooth by wear, seemed almost mournful. "Stay," he told Ghost. The direwolf ignored him, patting ahead while Tormund muttered about southern trouble, and tightened the laces of his bearskin jerkin. They followed a moose trail bending north. Soon the whiff of wood smoke thickened, and over it came the jangle of harness. Jon pushed through a thicket and froze. On the far slope, a small column wound upward. 6 riders, 2 wagons, and at its heart a plain gray wagon drawn by ponies. No banners flew. Yet the riders wore cloaks of snow-white silk, stamped with pale tree sigils. Winterfell's heart tree. Jon's pulse hammered. He dropped behind spruce boughs. Tormund crouched beside him, eyes wide. "I thought you left your banners south of the wall." "I did." Jon licked cold lips. "No lord of Winterfell sent that wagon." Ghost lowered his muzzle, teeth bared, though no growl escaped. Jon straightened. Fear scoured him, fear, and something rawer. Hope, lancing like dawn over black water. He sheathed long claw, strode into the open, and raised a hand. The riders halted. One dismounted, a tall shape in bright steel that caught full sun. Jon recognized the woman before the visor lifted. Brienne of Tarth walked toward him, sword at hip, face stern as a white cliff. Behind her, Podrick Payne reined the first wagon, and there, upon a chair fixed to its floor, sat Bran Stark. His brother's hair, once chestnut, had bleached near silver at the ends. His eyes were gray storms. He wore no crown. Jon tried to speak, but the words snarled in his throat until only a broken whisper came. "Why?" Bran smiled small and sad. "To tell you what you have forgotten, to give you what was taken." Jon took a single step forward. Snow sifted from a bough overhead, glittering between them. Ghost pressed close, nose quivering. "No," Jon said hoarsely. "I broke my vows once for a crown I never wore. I'll not break them twice." Bran's voice drifted like falling leaves. "You kept every vow that mattered. You kept living when you wished for death. You kept hope when the night was darkest. Come. Sit. Hear what the trees whisper about the broken world." Bester. Brienne laid a hand on Jon's elbow, light, cautious, yet anchoring him to the earth. Her eyes, bright with spent tears, asked forgiveness for secrets she carried. Tormund grunted, scratching his wild red beard as though fleas of prophecy leapt in it. Jon looked at the wagons, at the seed sacks, the obsidian crates. The ponies' plumes rhymed with frost. A caravan not for war but for sowing. He remembered Maester Aemon, blind and frail, saying a king must see the realm as a mother sees a child. He remembered Daenerys choking on her last breath. The snow seemed very quiet. South of the neck, in a damp tent, pitched beneath the frayed banners of House Frey, Sir Maris Mertens wrote in a neat cramped hand. Pages fluttered about her like doves as she inked line after line, a log of their days, a ledger of gifts, a catalogue of faces that peered from hedgerows as the king rode past. When Bran had named her to his guard, she thought only of her blade, but more and more his silences demanded a different weapon, memory. She wrote of the fishwife who pressed a silver coin into her gauntlet for the broken boy. She wrote of the weeping blacksmith who forgave the crown's taxes in exchange for a single hour of Bran's time, during which he laid his maimed daughter's hand upon the king's and begged for a blessing. Bran offered no miracle, yet when they left, the girl smiled for the first time since wildfire scars marred her cheek. Memory. It would outlive swords, outlive crowns. Sir Maris folded the parchment, sealed it with tallow, and tucked it into a bone cylinder. At dawn, she would place that cylinder in the roots of the weirwood that grew lonely in the ruins of Oldstones. She could not say why, only that the king desired such offerings and the land seemed to drink them like rain. Outside, petals from a crabapple drifted against the canvas. They smelled faintly of salt. In the deep vault, under the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister stood alone before the Iron Throne. The swords that forged it were dull now, rusted by dragonfire. Edges melted until they resembled wax gone soft beside a wick. The hall itself sagged, marble cracked beneath rafters blackened to charcoal. Yet the throne remained heavy as sin, and Tyrion's breath echoed off its bare walls like the last words of a dying god. He climbed the dais one step, then another, until his small hand brushed the twisted mass. For years he had imagined this climb ending in triumph or terror, or at least some bitter triumph of survival. But here at the summit, he felt only bone-deep fatigue. His father's ghost whispered in every rivet. His sister's laughter clinked in the hollow hilts. Somewhere far beyond this vault, Bran Stark rolled north to crown a brother whose birthright was death. Tyrion dug a dagger's point between two swords. With a grunt he pried loose a single link of blackened steel. It fell to the marble, and rang like a bell, a small sound in a hall built for roaring crowds, but it echoed long enough to raise dust motes that swirled like embers. He left the dagger where it lay. Outside, the city waited with its endless petitions. He would answer them, shape them, bend them toward a dream he scarcely understood. 5 paces from the doors he paused, listening for footsteps that would never again tread here. Daenerys. Jon. It. Ned Stark. Viserys. Robert Baratheon. All gone, leaving him the steward of a nation and the keeper of a wound. He wondered if Bran knew how cold the wound would feel. Night closed over the Shadow Lake, thick with stars. Jon knelt beside Bran's chair, his palms open upon his knees. Tormund had retired to the hut, muttering about crow magic. Ghost patrolled the tree line, a white wraith gliding through darkness. Brienne stood a respectful distance off. Podrick dozed against a wagon's wheel. Only Bran's hushed voice and the crackle of the fire remained. He spoke of roots older than empires, of rivers that remembered the first giants. He spoke of lords and wars and secrets hidden beneath Winterfell's crypts. He told Jon how the children of the forest carved faces in trees, so their gods could watch over each dawn, and how men once listened to wine for counsel, instead of sharpening spears. Hours slid away like ice calving from a glacier. Jon's eyes burned, yet he did not look away. Finally Bran's tale stilled. Steam curled from his lips though the fire guttered low. "I have traveled every road that was," he said. "I've forgotten more lives than any man will live. I see all, but I do not belong. Not here, not there. I am a bridge, and bridges exist only that others may cross." Jon's throat ached. "The world needs a bridge. Then let it be of stone." Bran's smile softened. "You were born of fire and ice, Jon. You carry both, and therefore you might one day walk between them." "I killed her," Jon choked. "I chose duty over love. You chose mercy over tyranny." Bran lifted a limp hand, brushed the back of Jon's wrist. "Mercy is the harder choice. It leaves deeper scars." Jon bowed his head until his brow touched Bran's pale fingers. He felt the boy's frail pulse, steady as falling snow. "I cannot be what they want." "Then, be what they need." Beyond them the wagons creaked. A breeze sighed over the lake, rippling starlight. Jon closed his eyes and saw the north. White meadows, gray stones, long shadows of wolves pacing ridges where no man ruled. He saw Winterfell's towers rising proud. He saw the wall shatter and rise again, not of ice but of men and women standing shoulder to shoulder against night. At the heart of it all, he saw Daenerys Targaryen's face, neither accusing nor forgiving, only waiting to see what he would make of the ash she left behind. When he opened his eyes, dawn had returned unnoticed. Ghost pressed against his side. Bran watched, silent and patient, as a root buried deep. Jon rose. His legs trembled from kneeling so long, yet when he stood, he felt strangely light, as though he had shrugged off a mail shirt he forgot he wore. "I will follow," he said, voice rough but clear. "To Winterfell, to King's Landing if need be, but not for thrones. For the people." Bran nodded once, grave as any maester. "For the people," he echoed. They broke camp swiftly. Tormund swore a red oath to trail them, as far as ale flows, then clasped Jon to his breast so fiercely ribs cracked. The wildling's eyes shone suspiciously bright. Ghost lingered behind until the last wagon creaked out of sight, then trotted after his master, a silent banner embroidered in snow. The journey south was slow, circuitous, guarded not by armies but by watchful ravens overhead. At every village Bran insisted on stopping. He spoke to millers, woodwives, septons, children. He distributed grain, listened to grievances, gave counsel that often amounted to silence while the petitioners solved their own problem aloud. Jon watched, learning more from Bran's stillness than from any speech. Knights rode at their flanks, but no horns announced them. Rumors spread like brushfire nonetheless. The broken king walking the king's road, the bastard wolf at his side, direwolf tall as a horse pacing the ditches. By the time they reached Moat Cailin, Sansa's riders waited under white banners. She greeted Jon first, arms tight around his neck, breath shivering, the North's chill forgotten. There were no tears. Starks wasted little water on weeping when snow would do. "Bran," she embraced more gently. He whispered something none heard, and her face tightened, but she did not ask him to repeat it. The restored gates of Winterfell swung wide. Crowds gathered on rampart and yard. Silent. They had heard the whispers, yet to see the truth rolling across cracked flagstones turned rumor to dream. Jon did not wear a crown, but a sword hung at his hip, and the wolf on his cloak clasp was grayed with ash from Dragonstone. Children stared, wide-eyed, at Ghost's silent tread. In the Godswood, Bran insisted on dismounting. Sir Robin lifted him bodily from the chair and set him before the heart tree, whose face wept red sap. Its eyes glimmered as though seeing at last the fruit of an ancient seed. Jon stood opposite, hands loose, cloak stirring in gentle wind. Sansa, Brienne, the knights, even Podrick and the wagon drovers, arrayed themselves beneath the red leaves. No horns, no maesters, no high septon. Only old gods and quiet men. Bran's voice was steady though soft as snowfall. I, Brandon of House Stark, called the Broken, do lay down the crown of the 6 kingdoms. I take back the name of Stark and with it the charge laid upon my blood. I name Jon of houses Stark, and Targaryen protector of the realm and king of all the peoples, high and low, who look to Winterfell's fires for hope. Lan? He knelt. The breeze caught gray leaves and spun them around his shoulders like a shroud. For one breath all were still, waiting. Then Sansa followed, folding to her knees. Brienne knelt. Podrick, the knights, the drovers. Finally, with a sigh as old as winter, Jon knelt too, facing Bran across the mossy ground. No, he said quietly. You are my king. Stand. Bran smiled, small and knowing. Stand with me, then. 2 stones split the stream softer than one. Hand slid beneath his arms. Sir Robin and Brienne lifted Bran to his chair. Jon stood as well, but before he could turn, Bran gripped his sleeve. Look. Jon followed Bran's gaze. The heart tree's carved eyes seemed to glow crimson. Sap trickled like blood from the mouth carved centuries past. Yet what stunned Jon was the reflection mirrored in that bleeding wood. Himself crowned not with gold, but with a circlet of woven weirwood and mistletoe, ghostly pale, pulsing faint green. He blinked. The vision faded, leaving only the scarlet mask of the tree. Far to the south, in a stale cabin aboard a sluggish cog, making for the island of Enneath, Grey Worm unrolled a salt-stained parchment, delivered by a captain who dared not meet his eyes. He read once, twice. When he finished, he walked onto the deck where bright fish leapt in the wake, their scales glittering shards of broken sunlight. Missandei's memory brushed his ear like a whispered name. His hand closed around the parchment, until ink bled onto his palm. He turned to the sea, and cast the letter across foam. Wind snatched it, whirling script and seal alike into the bright, empty blue, where it fluttered a moment, caught a beam of sun, and burned. In King's Landing, Tyrion bent over the painted table where Aegon the Conqueror once planned war. His quills scratched lists. Grain tallies, timber roots, wells to be dug. A raven perched atop the chair where the king once sat. It opened its beak, but made no sound. Only when Tyrion looked up did he see the scroll tied to its leg. He broke the seal. Read, ducked. Stared into air, as though he might see the end of the world curling like smoke over rooftops. After a moment he poured himself a chalice of wine and drank deep. Then, carefully, he crossed out the column labeled Succession and wrote one word beside it: Hope. Night gathered again over Winterfell. In the great hall, torches lit stone to amber. Jon sat at the high table, Bran beside him in his wheeled chair. The room lay hush. No songs yet, no cheers. Just the crackling of a hearth big enough to roast aurochs whole. Sansa poured Jon a cup of northern ale brewed thick and dark as peat. He lifted it, saw his hand tremble, set it down. Bran spoke only 3 words: "This is beginning." Jon thought of walls beyond counting, of graves unmarked, of lives burned because men desired crowns. He closed his eyes, breathed the hall scents: wood smoke, pine resin, fresh baked bread, and felt them anchor him to life. When he looked again, Bran still watched, patient as a stone in slow water. John lifted the cup once more. His voice when it came was soft, almost shy. Yet it carried to every corner. "For the people," he said. And somewhere deep beneath Winterfell, in crypts older than the Starks themselves, a thin root stirred, sipping a promise as old as snow. Confronting. The snows of late autumn thickened through Winterfell's courtyards, draping each crenellation in white wool and muffling the clang of soldiers' drills, until steel rang distant as half-remembered bells. Fires blazed in every hearth, yet the chill clung like a second tunic. Folk walked fast between halls, breath steaming, speaking soft so as not to rouse the hush that had fallen over the castle. The night King Bran laid his crown at Jon Snow's feet. For 3 days no horns announced oaths, no minstrels sang of new kings. Jon spent dawns in the Godswood, kneeling beside Bran beneath the bleeding heart tree, while direwolf and ravens kept silent watch. By daylight, he sat with Sansa in the solar, heads bent over ledgers of grain, wool, and iron. When dusk crept in, he sparred in the yard, Longclaw flashing silver against Brienne's greatsword, until sweat shone on mail. At night, he ate little, slept less, pacing ramparts as ghosts prowled the shadows below. On the 4th morning, the quiet broke. A single horn blast carried over the walls, short, sharp, echoing down the King's Road, and every head on the battlements turned south. Riders approached, 30 or more, their banner a grey direwolf quartered with a crowned stag. Jon reached the gatehouse in time to see 3 figures dismount: Gendry Baratheon, tall in a fur-trimmed leather cloak; Arya Stark, hair blown wild as the eastern seas; and Davos Seaworth, cheeks red from the bite of long miles. Jon crossed the yard before guards could form a line. Arya's grin split her wind-chafed face, and she jumped the last muddy puddle to fling arms around his neck. He caught her, spinning once, as the crowd of onlookers burst into cheers. They had hoarded like acorns against frost. "You're late," he murmured, but the rasp in his voice betrayed more relief than reproach. "Had to circle Moat Cailin. Something about the king wanting to travel unannounced." Arya's gray eyes flicked to his breast where the direwolf pin clasped his cloak. "Seems I missed a choice bit of news." Before Jon could answer, Gendry knelt, gauntlet over heart. "Storm's End hails its king," he said, voice steady despite the cold. "The Baratheon line stands with the line of the dragon and the wolf." Davos copied the bow, though his old knees creaked loud enough to draw chuckles from the guards. "Good men follow good hearts, lad. And we could do with a few less crowns turned poison." Jon bid them rise, but Gendry stayed a moment longer, head lowered not in subservience, but in hard-won respect. When he stood, his eyes burned with purpose. "We've matters to settle," he said quietly, glancing to the ramp where Bran's chair waited beneath a wolfskin awning. "Your brother sees farther than we do, but will walk what ground he marks." An hour later, the great hall's long tables groaned beneath trenchers of venison pie, wheels of hard goat's cheese, and buttery loaves glazed with honey. Sansa's doing, for if the realm was to weigh its new order, she meant it to do so on a full belly. Lords of the North filed in first, then Brienne and the reformed Kingsguard, Davos in battered plate, Arya in breeches, and a dark leather jerkin, sewn with Nymeria's sigil, and at last Bran, Podrick wheeling his chair to the raised platform beside the direwolf throne carved hastily from ancient weirwood, hauled up from the Godswood's edge. Jon remained standing while ale was poured. Silence draped the hall again, not heavy this time but taut as a bowstring. "Our sister says guests should eat before business," Jon began, nodding to the tables. "But if we wait, the stew will sour in our bellies. Let's speak plain now, then break bread afterward." A murmur of assent rippled down the benches. "Words reached every corner," Jon said. "Some doubt, some hope, some call me oathbreaker twice over. None of that feeds the hungry or rebuilds the South. So we'll start here. We decide together what king means, or whether the word has weight left at all." Gendry leaned forward, dark brows knit. "Storm's End can send lumber and shipwrights for King's Landing's docks, but we'll need coin for salt and nails. The Reach is richest, yet their fields still smoke from dragon fire. They'll want tariffs cut." "Must." "A fair grant," Sansa conceded. If the Tyrell stewards agree to give seed grain in exchange, they'll recoup thrice come harvest. Lady Barbary Dustin of Barrowton thumped her cup. Trade is talk for bales and bushels. What of swords? 300 Golden Company deserters haunt the Riverlands. Who rides against them while the crown sits counting oats? Brienne answered. The new Kingsguard numbers 7 once more. Add 200 sworn to Winterfell, 100 from the Vale, and 50 Stormlanders who came north with Lord Gendry. We can march within the week. Das. Against sellswords used to elephants and cannon. Davos flicked fingers toward Bran. Best send a commander who knows their tricks. King Brandon's mind walks field and flank alike. All eyes turned to Bran. He sat unmoving, yet his gaze flooded the air like moonlight. Steel alone won't win this field, he said softly. Nor coin. We mend the realm through its roots, water them, and branches heal. Forget the trunk, fight on the boughs, the tree still bleeds. Dandelion? A hush followed. Even Arya stilled, as if her breath might stir meanings yet unfurled. Jon met Bran's eyes. Then tell us, brother, where do we water first? In the cracks. Bran's hand drifted to the iron-bound arms of his chair. Old Wounds weeping longest lies south and east. Blackwater Bay to the Storm Islands, the burned river villages, the marchlands where orphan boys drill with spears of ash. Heal them, and the sellswords will find no cause to linger. Lady Dustin snorted. Words for singers. Steel chases vultures faster than sermons. Nin? Sermons no, Bran replied. Justice. The single word rolled through the rafters. Something in its cadence pried at hidden doors in every breast. Jon felt it like a gloved hand around his ribs. Justice, he repeated. For all. Highborn and small folk. For free folk beyond the wall and those sold to slavers across the narrow sea. We'll not hang every thief, nor knight every killer. We'll weigh each deed. He paused, scanning the crowded benches. And we'll begin in King's Landing. The Iron Throne sits hollow. Let it stand a while longer. We travel as a ruling council, North, Stormlands, Vale, Riverlands, and Bran to bear witness. We listen, we tend wounds, we rebuild houses before castles. When spring comes, we'll call a great moot beside the trident, and ask the realm if one crown still suits 17 million souls. Now. A low rumble of surprise, skepticism, but more than a little wonder rose among the lords. Davos smacked his lips thoughtfully. A king asking leave to be king. That's new. New is needed, Jon said. He signaled the servers. Dishes clattered, and conversation burst like thawing ice. Yet under the din, each heart weighed possibilities. Some bright, some dark, all suddenly alive. Later that night, Arya found Jon on the outer battlements above the guards' archery butts, Ghost beside him like a living snowdrift. Torches guttered, smearing light across stone slick with rime. You believe all that? She asked, leaning elbows on the Merlon. I have to. His breath plumed. If I doubt it, so will they. She studied his profile, new lines at the eyes, a scar half hidden by beard. You sound older. I feel older. A wry smile softened his mouth. 7 lives older. Arya's fingers drummed the stone. If the great moot refuses the crown, what then? We go back beyond the wall. Live in huts? Fish trout? Maybe. He watched snowflakes catch fire in torchlight, then wink to ash. I think I could be content. She nudged him with a shoulder. Liar. You'd miss the worrying. He laughed, quiet. Maybe that too. Below, a lone horn sounded from the west gatehouse. One blast, travelers approaching. Jon straightened, hand sliding to Longclaw's hilt. But the sentry's answering call came calm, almost curious. Minutes later, a rider emerged into the pale torch glow of the courtyard, bearing a banner none in Winterfell had seen in years. A pale snake devouring its own tail on a field of deep green. Arya's brow furrowed. I know that sigil. Citadel, isn't it? No. Jon's breath caught. It's Oldtown, but not Hightower. It's the emblem of the Order of the Green Hand. Thought they died out with the Gardener Kings. So did I. Jon was already moving for the ramp. Come on. The rider stood beside a lathered courser, hood thrown back to reveal a weather-tanned woman of 50 in maester's gray robes, cinched with a belt of twisted rushes dyed green. Around her neck hung neither link nor chain but a single bronze leaf cast in gold. "I bring letters for King Bran and Lord Protector Jon," she announced, voice soft but thrumming with urgency. "And news from the citadel that cannot wait a moon's turn." Bran emerged from behind, Podrick hurrying to keep pace on the uneven flagstones. The maester dipped her head, then pressed 2 scrolls into Jon's hand, wax seals emblazoned with the 7-pointed star and the 3-headed dragon intertwined around a sheaf of reeds. "What order do you claim?" Bran asked. "I am Maester Calla, late of Honeyholt, now sworn to the Green Hand. The old books we keep speak of winters long before the long night, and of seeds planted in dragonfire. Those seeds crack open again." Jon glanced at the first scroll. Its script flowed elegant, familiar, Samwell Tarly's hand. "To His Grace Brandon Stark, Keeper of Memory, and to Lord Jon Snow, chosen of root and flame." Jon skimmed lines, heart tightening. Sam wrote of surveys at Summerhall, of glass candles blazing unbidden in the vaults of the citadel, of dragons' bones humming some nights like distant horns. And beneath, appended in smaller ink, "Archmaester Marwyn is missing. 4 tomes bound in Valyrian leather gone from the locked library. Rumor claims he sailed for Valyria on a fire ship." The second scroll bore the seal of Queen Asha Greyjoy of the Iron Islands. It spoke of strange storms shredding nets, fish washing ashore boiled in their scales, and sightings of a shadow, long as a kraken gliding beneath gray swells east of Pike. Bran's gaze turned inward, pupils shrinking. Snow hissed on torch flares. Arya shifted uneasily. Jon folded the letters, mind racing. "Why bring these warnings here?" "Because," Maester Calla said, drawing a brittle breath, "the King's Road quakes under every hoofbeat. Something stirs the world's bones, your graces. The last time Valyria whispered, half this continent burned. We think it means to speak again." Then nah. A gust drove snow in a sharp swirl between them. Bran closed his eyes. When he opened them, the gray had deepened to the color of storms over deep water. "The river of time forks," he murmured. "One branch runs red, one runs black. We must choose which mouth to follow, and quickly." Jon looked to Ghost, the only creature untroubled, white fur rippling. "Then the moot waits. We ride for Oldtown first. If knowledge is a sword, we'll need a keener edge than we carry." By dawn, the courtyard rattled with activity. Sansa reorganized stores to provision 200 riders for the southern dash. Gendry dispatched ravens, summoning his storm knights home. Brienne drilled archers to saddle in rain or snow. Bran met alone with Maester Calla, and when they re-emerged, each wore an expression carved from opposing elements. Calla fierce with mortal resolve, Bran calm as windless water. They departed Winterfell through blowing snow at mid-morning. Jon rode at the van on a gray destrier whose dapples matched the overcast sky. Beneath his cloak, the folded letters pricked like thorns against his ribs. The last sight he carried of Winterfell was not ramparts receding, but Sansa's slim silhouette high on the gate tower, hand lifted in farewell, red hair a flare of autumn above new-fallen drifts. Southward they pressed, speed above stealth. Ravens raced ahead, carrying commands forged in haste, yet tempered by Bran's visions. Arya scouted miles beyond, slipping between shadows, as though the world itself bent to her intent. Gendry kept stride with Jon, hammer strapped across his back in lieu of a lord's sword. On the 5th night, they reached the headwaters of the Green Fork, and found its shallows choked with corpses, fisherfolk from Hag's Mire, their boats shattered, bodies blistered raw. No arrow wounds, no sword cuts. Skin peeled from flesh as if boiled. Maester Calla dismounted to examine one corpse, muttering prayers older than the 7. When she rose, her gloved fingertips smoked faintly where they had touched blackened flesh. "Dragon heat," she said. "But no fire I know chars and leaves bone white in the same stroke." Bran's stare tunneled through the dark. A different light burned here. The dead weirwood of the Isle of Faces had not borne red leaves in a century, but its stone-pale bark fissured that night, sap oozing ruby. In dreams Bran watched robed children circle the trunk, chanting in a tongue drowned by centuries. He reached for them and felt only bark turning to scales beneath his hand, the heart tree shifting into a serpent biting its tail. He woke before dawn. Sweat silvering his brow, though frost rimed his lashes. Podrick leaned close, alarmed, but Bran sent him for Maester Calla at once. They spoke in hushed tones while the camp struck tense. Blood and fire returned together, Bran told her. If the old songs are right, the dance never truly ended. Its embers smolder beneath Valyrian ash. Someone fans them now. Calla's eyes narrowed. Marwyn searches after power in ruins. But who moves shadows beneath pike? The same hand, perhaps, or another wedded in purpose. Many threads, but one loom. She brushed snow from her sleeves. The green hand stands at your side. Tell us where to plant seeds. Bran's gaze drifted south, past hills, rivers, cities sleeping unaware. On Dragonstone, he whispered. Under the mountain, an egg quickens. It must never hatch. By the time the party reached Harrenhal's blackened bones, fresh smoke marred the horizon from the west. Villages in Lord Piper's domain, raised by sellswords. Lady Dustin's earlier call for steel found its answer. 100 of her riders awaited north of the ruined castle, chainmail clinking like distant hail. They joined with Gendry's men and Brienne's knights, swelling Joan's host to near 500. The sellswords numbered 800 and held the burned shell of Maidenpool. Jon weighed storm against hurry. Crush them now or push for Dragonstone before the egg hatched? Bran answered without speaking. His vision lit Jon's mind. Dragon wings over Blackwater Bay, a city screaming again. Yet justice mattered. Jon split the force. Gendry, Brienne, and Lady Dustin to break the sellswords. Davos and Maester Calla to secure ships at Cracklaw Point, while he, Bran, Arya, and 100 swift riders dashed for King's Landing's coast road. Brienne protested, leaving Bran unguarded, but Bran touched her gauntleted wrist. Steel cannot shield me from what stalks me, he said. Only swiftness, and faith that roots run deeper than swords. They parted beneath Harrenhal's melted towers, an uneasy farewell bound by necessity. Snow swirled between broken walls, hushing the past as new oaths echoed. The journey south blurred into a fever of gray days, black nights, and horizons pulsing with distant fires. Villages once lively lay quiet, doors barred, folk eyeing travelers like omens. At Maidenpool's outskirts Jon glimpsed plume after plume, where Gendry's banner advanced. Thunder of hooves, clash of steel, distant war horns carried on salt wind. He longed to turn east to join them, but Arya urged his horse on. Another battle won't change the shape of the realm, she said. Stopping that egg might. South of Duskendale, they found proof of Bran's dread, scorched earth in a perfect ring half a league across. Livestock roasted where they stood, but no flame marks, no charcoal. In the center, a single spiral burned into the soil, 5 ridges turning inward to a pit lined with slick glass. Jon dismounted, stones crunching beneath his boots, though the soil was softer than ash. He peered into the pit, empty, yet the air above shimmered with heat, though the day was cold. Bran ordered the pit filled and a cairn raised. They buried the ground with salt and lime until daylight failed. That night, huddled round sparse campfire, Jon asked Bran what he had seen. A hand older than Valyria, Bran answered. A tongue older than dragons. It scrapes at shells, searching for what must not be born. And if it finds one already quickened, then the world weeps again. They reached Blackwater Bay under a sky bruised violet. The bay's waters boiled at the mouth, spitting brine high enough to salt the air. Davos awaited on a spry galley, sails reefed. Gendry's and Brienne's forces trailed but a day behind, the sellswords shattered, their captains set to rebuild the razed villages under watch. Atop the galley's mast streamed a new banner, a direwolf entwined with a crowned stag, on a field split by a river, and a smith's hammer crossing a quill. Jon studied it as he came aboard. "Looks crowded," he told Davos. "The realm's crowded with fools and fate," Davos answered, grin flashing. "Best our flag shows room for all." Arya had vanished into the rigging before the planks were drawn, scouting unseen. Bran was hoisted in chair and all, crew gawking until Jon's raised brow reminded them of courtesy. They set sail for Dragonstone at dusk, 2 other cogs following with 50 mounted spears apiece. Wind stiffened, carrying the scent of storm and something else, sulphurous, electric. Ghost paced the deck restlessly. Davos kept one hand on the wheel though a helmsman stood fast. His gaze probed dark water as though it might rise teeth first. Midwatch found Arya perched on the bowsprit, stare fixed on the horizon where Dragonstone's volcanic cone stabbed moonlit cloud. Jon joined her, cloak snapping. "You know the tunnels under the castle," she said without turning. "I'll slip through, find the egg, end it before it's born." "Not alone." She glanced back, gray eyes keen. "You'll need to talk with lords, keep Bran safe. I'm quicker. Quicker yet with 2 shadows." He raised a hand before she argued. "And Bran guides us. He sees doors no wall can hide." As if summoned, Bran wheeled forward, Podrick easing him beside the mast. Sea spray streaked his hair silver. "No shadow enters alone," he agreed. "Night's womb grows wary. It expects a single blade. 2 may pass where 1 is caught." Arya smirked triumph. Jon sighed. It was settled. Dragonstone rose from the sea, like a petrified leviathan, jagged spines and fangs silhouetted against dawn's gray-pink smear. Smoke puffed from vents along the slope, hotter and thicker than any crew remembered. Davos eyed them uneasily. "Vent hasn't breathed like that since Stannis' day," he muttered. "Feels wrong." Jon, Arya, Bran, and a file of guards landed at a small pier south of the main harbor. The ancient stone causeway wound upward. Wind moaned through hollow gargoyles. No sentries greeted them. The castle seemed abandoned until, rounding a bastion, they came upon a spectacle. Small folk crowded before the cavernous Dragonmont gate, kneeling in rows, heads bowed to a hooded figure atop a basalt plinth. The figure's voice rolled through the air, amplified by the vaulted approach. "Fire is birth. Fire is cleansing. The mother's wings once scorched tyrants. They shall rise anew to break our chains." The crowd murmured assent, feverish. Bran's eyes widened. "Melanie of Lys," he whispered. "A red priestess." Jon recalled Thoros and his flaming sword, the Brotherhood's resurrection tales. He stepped forward, but Arya caught his sleeve. "Crowd's too tight," she hissed. "We spook them. Blood spills." Bran spoke instead, voice clear yet soft. "Where's the egg, Melanie?" The hooded woman turned. Her face, moon-pale, shone with sweat. "Broken king," she greeted, drawing surprise from the kneelers. "You relinquished mortal rule. Why meddle in divine promise?" "No promise fires without cost," Bran said. "Once, fire birthed agony that still smolders in these stones." Melanie's eyes gleamed. "And from ash grows truth. The Lord of Light purifies. He showed me a world saved by one flame reborn." Jon stepped beside Bran. "Show me the people saved by dragonfire. I've seen only bones." Melanie smiled as if pitying a child. "Bones feed new life. You of all know rebirth, Targaryen wolf." Her hand lifted. The crowd shifted, dozens rising with torches dipped in pitch, lighting them from braziers set among the columns. Flare after flare caught, reflecting in upturned eyes. "No blood," Bran murmured. "Words first." Jon raised both palms. "We come for peace. Let us see the egg. If your God wills it live, let him prove it before all." The priestess considered. A hush fell so deep the surf below faintly echoed. "Come," she said at length. "But only he who holds roots in fire may enter." She pointed to Jon. Arya bristled. "I go too." Melanie's smile broadened. "Shadowcat may follow, if she leaves her claws at the threshold." Jon met Arya's eyes. Silent accord passed. They advanced, Bran remaining with Podrick and their guards among the restless crowd. The priestess led them into Dragonmont, through a corridor warm as a kiln. Veins of glowing rock pulsed beneath obsidian walls. Deeper, the path widened into a chamber whose floor was a natural bowl lined with slag-formed glass. At its center sat the egg. It loomed waist-high, mottled charcoal and crimson, surface veined with dim ember glow. Heat shimmered above it. Jon's breath faltered, recognizing memories of Rhaegal and Drogon hatching in another lifetime. Melanie knelt, palms raised. Behold, the world's salvation. Arya patted sideways, measuring distance to shadows. Jon stepped closer until warmth bathed his face. What salvation? To burn King's Landing again? To break more chains with fire and spear? Melanie's voice softened. Not burn. Unite. A single dragon bound to no master will remind kings their crowns are borrowed. That dragon will blaze until none dare kneel, because no man shall stand above another. Jon shook his head. Crown or not, someone directs flame. Someone always claims the leash. Then claim it, she urged. You are fire-given flesh, blood of the dragon. Ride it and rise, free the world. Arya snorted. He's freed enough for one life. Jon ignored her. Fire answers fire. What of ice? What of those burned who cannot speak? My queen believed as you do. Her dream ended in ash. Melanie's gaze flickered, a shadow of doubt passing. She strayed, she murmured. She let rage guide flame. So will the next, Arya said. So will you. The egg's glow deepened, cracks searing lines of molten red across its shell. Jon felt it calling, a heartbeat in the stone, booming under his ribs. He pressed both palms to the shell. Visions blistered his mind. Skies torn by wings, cities lit like torches, seas boiling. Amid the maelstrom stood a weeping child clutching broken chains. Beyond, Bran's voice whispered, you carry both. Jon's hands trembled, remembering knives, betrayals, vows. He closed his eyes and dug deeper. Memory surged. Snow-quiet nights at Castle Black, laughter over meager stews, ghost first growl. He grits his kiss in a cave. Warmth and cold, fire and ice, both shaping him. He opened every door inside, letting the egg feel his doubt, grief, mercy. The shell pulsed brighter, then sputtered, cracks sealing as quickly as they opened. Heat cooled. Melanie gasped. Arya drew needle half an inch. Jon stepped back. No dragon today. The priestess rose, wrath lighting her features. You deny the Lord's gift. I deny no God, Jon answered. But I choose the living over the promise of power. Melanie's scream rent the air. She snatched a dagger from her belt and lunged. Arya moved first, needle flashing, batting the dagger aside, foot sweeping the priestess to her knees. Before the woman could recover, Arya held blade to throat. Jon, breath ragged, lifted the egg. It was heavy, but no longer hot. He carried it to a vent where molten rock glimmered far below and released it. The egg tumbled silently, swallowed by fiery dark. A dull roar followed, as if magma sighed. Arya bound Melanie's wrists. Crowd might riot. We lead them out first, Jon said, and hope they still want peace. Outside the mountain, Bran felt the egg's heat fade. A raven shrieked overhead, then dove east. He whispered, thanks the bird alone could hear. The crowd stirred as Jon dragged Melanie forth in irons, Arya at his flank. At sight of their priestess captive, torches lifted, shouts rising like flares. But Jon raised his voice above them. The egg is gone, he declared. Your God may send another sign, but not this. This island lost blood enough to dragonfire. Let it be a tomb, not a cradle. Then Tyrion. Some wailed, others cursed, yet many bowed heads, relief outweighing zeal. One old man fell to knees, thanking any god who would hear. Jon ordered food from the castle stores, shared among them, and left a garrison of Stormland soldiers and Northmen under Davos, to tend the hungry and bar worshippers from the vents. Bran met Jon on the wind-scoured strand at dusk. You felt the psalm, Bran said. Jon nodded. staring at his palm still tingling. Fire can sing sweet, but its lullaby ends in screams. It tested you. You answered. Mentor. John glanced at Melanie, guarded aboard the galley. She still believes. Others will. Faith is a river, Bran said. Redirect the flow, don't damn it. A new path to sea leaves the old bed dry. How? Let her live, Bran answered. Show mercy, and her followers will see a god of mercy in your face. John exhaled icy mist. And if the tide turns? Then build higher ground. Bran's faint smile carried tired wisdom. The moot grows more urgent. The realm must choose whether it worships crowns or compassion. One Nerency. They sailed for King's Landing the next dawn, but halfway across the bay black shapes broke the surface ahead. Ships, sails tattered, decks awash. As John's galley neared, he saw the crews, unsullied, their eunuch faces solemn, Grey Worm at the prow in salt-stained cuirass. Their flagship came alongside, both vessels drifting almost in embrace but weapons undrawn. Grey Worm hailed John across a narrowing gap. I swore to kill you, he said, voice flat, carrying over the water. Then I swore to serve peace. Which oath rules today? None. John stood alone at the rail. The one that hurts less, he answered. Grey Worm's dark eyes flickered. The priestess told us Dragon promised freedom. She promised death again. John gestured to Dragonstone smoldering astern. I chose otherwise. The unsullied captain weighed salt-heavy air. You would die to keep dragons dead. I would live to keep people alive. Grey Worm's lips parted. A breath. Perhaps a laugh lost to sea. He glanced to Melanie bound on deck. The world breaks promises, he said. But maybe pain teaches better oaths. He turned, barking orders. The unsullied ships sheered off east. Before distance swallowed his voice, he called once more. Hold peace, Jon Snow. I will watch. King's Landing emerged green and gold in late afternoon sun. Scars of dragonfire patched by new roofs. Half-built sept rising like a pale ribcage. Tyrion met them at the quay, ink-stained, haggard, but eyes bright with determination. When he saw Melanie bound, he raised brows. Collecting zealots now? I've enough in the capital. Hope she's cure, not contagion, John muttered. They convened in the Red Keep's lesser throne room. No iron throne present. Only benches and a broad round table carved from black oak. Lords had begun to gather. Edmure Tully representing the Riverlands, Lord Robert Royce for the Vale, Sir Harlan Tyrell stewarding the Reach, until Eleanor Tyrell came of age, Lady Asha for the Iron Islands, Prince Coran Jordain for Dorne. Even the High Septon attended, robes of crystal fading to dusk hues in candlelight. Tyrion cleared his throat. Here we are. Less swords than last time, more ghosts, but perhaps thicker skulls. Devon? John rose, recounting Dragonstone's events, the boiling river corpses, Marwyn's disappearance, the egg destroyed. Gasps met parts of the tale, shouts others. When silence returned, John fixed each lord in turn. We stand at a crossing. Powers of fire stir again, powers older than we fathom. Another might chase dragons, claim them for banners. I want. The realm chooses, crown and flame or root and river. He looked to Bran, who nodded, rolling forward. I have seen what a crown may do, Bran said. It bends men until they snap, or turns them to blades. Yet a crown can be a circle, unbroken, shared. We propose a new bond, no throne of swords, but a convening circle, a council elected by each region's free folk and lords both. The king, if king there be, will sit in that circle, one voice among many, bound to its will. Murmurs surged. Revolutionary, impossible, madness, wisdom. Princess Asha leaned back, boots on a rung. Islands vote by salt and trial. Our free folk might choose a reaver who'd gut your council. Then rule of council must bind even the sea, Bran replied. But its shape you help draft. No one voice forges the ring. While longships sail, rings break, Asha quipped, though admiration glinted beneath. Lord Royce spoke next, heavy brow shadowing steel eyes. Valefolk trust airy blood to guide them. Electing hedge knights weakens lines sworn since the Arryn falcon took wing. Lines untempered snap, Davos interjected. Give small folk voice, and their blades stay sheathed longer. The debate churned past moonrise, through courses of spiced wine and cold meats. Yet no walkouts occurred, no gauntlets thrown. Something steadied the room, perhaps Bran's calm, perhaps Jon's silent watch, perhaps the memory of ash still staining stones outside. Near dawn they reached accord. In 6 moons' time, at the site of the field of fire where Aegon first used dragonflame, a great moot would convene. Each realm would elect 5 delegates, 2 lords, 2 small folk, and 1 chosen by faith or guild. They would decide whether to ratify the Circle Charter. Until then, Jon would act as protector, touring each realm to ensure fair elections, with Bran advising, Tyrion stewarding the capital. As candles guttered low, Jon rose last, weary yet lighter. He felt no crown's weight, only the tug of tasks ahead. Tyrion lingered, watching lords disperse. You think they'll hold to it? They must, Jon said, or we unmake more than crowns. The dwarf nodded, thoughtful. The Iron Throne will rust alone. Let it. Jon looked east where dawn paled windows. Maybe one day children will ask what a throne was. Tyrion chuckled. And maesters will bore them with tales of fools who chased dragons. Jon smiled, faint but true. Let's give them happier stories to learn. That afternoon, Arya pulled him aside on the ramparts. I won't stay for councils, she said. He'd expected as much. West of West still calls? Always. She sheathed needle. But I'll sail after the moot. 6 moons to watch your circle hold. Then horizon. He hugged her hard. Send ravens, if the edge of the world keeps ravens. She smirked. If not, I'll whistle loud. Ghost licked her hand. She scratched his ear. News of the charter raced across Westeros. Some cheered, some threatened revolt, some prayed. In the Reach, peasants met in apple orchards, electing spokesmen. On the Iron Islands, captains argued over who truly spoke for deckhands. In Dorne, princes and water carriers, alike debated under silk awnings, as sun seared sand. In Oldtown, Samwell Tarly returned to the citadel to find locks smashed, shelves stripped, a single phrase chalked on a pillar. Light feeds on darkness feeds on light. He closed fist around quill, heart hammering. In Valyria's shadowed ruins, Marwyn studied glyphs glowing like fireflies across black marble, muttering of gateways and second comings. And far north, beyond even the haunted forest, a glimmer stirred beneath permafrost, a blue pulse, faint as first heartbeat, thrumming once, twice, then still. Jon rode from King's Landing before dawn. Beside him Bran's chair rattled on a sprung carriage designed by Gendry, leather straps absorbing shock. Behind, a diverse train followed. Maesters, healers, smiths, singers bound to bring aid or gather voices. Not an army, an embassy of possibility. As the city's walls dwindled, Jon glanced back. Smoke rose from forges, not pyres. Bells chimed rebuilding, not surrender. He turned south toward the Reach where harvest gold awaited, where council halls buzzed with argument and hope. Ghost loped ahead, tail high. Wind carried scents of tilled earth, river mud, distant blossoms. Jon breathed deep. The road stretched long. Dragons might stir again. Shadows creep. Crowns tempt. But roots had been watered, branches pruned. Somewhere above, unseen, a weirwood leaf unseen by southern eyes fluttered crimson against blue sky. The realm walked toward its reckoning. Jon walked with it, neither lord above nor soldier apart, merely a man between fire and ice, hands open, heart scarred yet beating, ready to choose mercy each dawn that rose. And high upon the carriage Bran closed his gray eyes, seeing that dawn spill across all 7 kingdoms, seeing children race through fields their fathers once sowed with war, seeing a circle carved from many hands where no throne cast shadow. He smiled, and the road rolled on beneath them, endless as rivers, bright as hope. A.K. A wet wind smelling of crushed bay leaf swept the rose road where it skirted the foot of the Red Mountains, and each gust dimpled the tarpaulin stretched over Bran's carriage until the leather snapped like a sail. Rain had dogged the column for 4 days. Fine, needling stuff that soaked wool and found every joint in the harness. But now the sky merely brooded, milk-gray and swollen, threatening a downpour that never quite arrived. John rode at the head, on the gray destrier he had named Quiet. Cloak hood thrown back so the damp cooled the scar on his cheek. Behind him, boots squelched, and harness jingled in a subdued rhythm. Soldiers and singers alike conserving strength for the next twist of the climb. The reach began here in tussocked valleys, where lavender and mountain thyme scented the mist, but even the flowers hung limp under the sullen sky. Still, the smell of living earth after dry winter heartened John. Homes lay ahead, orchards, grain barns, slate-roofed cottages, and folk already gathered along the verge, though their shoes sank to the ankles. They waved shyly, uncertain whether one greeted a king or some stranger, and children shouted at the sight of Ghost, loping pale and mud-spattered at Joan's stirrup. By mid-morning, they topped the pass and saw Brightwater Creek threading silver far below. The far bank shimmered with green patchwork, Hightower tithes, Oakhart vineyards, tumble-down seps the Tyrrells, once kept whitewashed. John reined in for the view. Bran's carriage drew abreast, Podrick guiding the ash wheels clear of a rut. Rain had slicked Bran's hair to his temples, and the damp lent his cheeks a faint color. "Sam waits 2 days' ride," Bran said. John nodded, studying the distant lattice of farmland. "Any trouble between us and Oldtown?" "None yet. But while the Reach chooses delegates, old quarrels stir. House Peak dusts banners. Red wines brace wine against tax. Fallow men whisper of crusades. Because the Ironborn raid arbor shipping. Because fear yawns where crowns once plugged doubt. If the charter fails, they angle to seize what scraps." John sat quiet, moving again. "Then we arrive before fear festers." Hours later, they reached a rise overlooking a lakeside hamlet named Sedgefield, narrows of reed-roof hovels, fenced by willows. Smoke rose gentle. The column halted for noonbread, yet no villagers emerged. John dismounted with Davos and Arya, caution palpable. Ghost's slow rumble rolled through hush. A broken skiff lay half-sunken at the jetty. On the planks, a red smear tracked to the door of the alehouse. Inside, they found a single man slumped against casks, eyes open, lips blackened. Arya knelt, sniffed the crusted wound at his neck. "Leeches on the jugular," she said. But no leech left. Davos crouched. Salt and smoke round the gash. "Ritual?" John scanned overturned tables. Took blood, spilled drink, left corpse, maybe more missing. They uncovered empty cradles in 2 huts. Straw reeked of ash. Arya tracked prints to the lake edge where water lilies floated crimson. John gathered the host at the green. "Riders scour the margins," he ordered. "Look for prisoners." Hours later, 2 scouts returned bearing a child half delirious. Through chattering teeth she told of hooded riders chanting "seed for seed," while dragging 6 villagers south. A mark scored her palm, a circle devouring its tail. Bran's eyes clouded as he held the child's hand. When he spoke, voice distant, he named a crossroads inn 10 leagues ahead. "They camp there tonight," he said. 18 riders, 3 wagons, 1 crate bound in bronze, humming like summer wasps. John tightened girth on Quiet. "They move for Oldtown. After dusk we ride light. Weapons only." Gendry insisted on coming, swinging his smith's hammer. Arya vanished to scout hours before sundown. Bran remained in the carriage surrounded by torchbearers, lips moving soundlessly, while Sam's raven nibbed parchment for messages warning Oldtown. Moonless dark pooled thick by the time Joan's vanguard neared the inn. The old coaching yard squatted in a hollow of poplar. Shutters blacked. In the stable yard flickered green witch fire. Not torch flame, but weak alchemical lanterns. Through their sickly glow, John counted silhouettes. Sentry pacing, 2 more crouched at wagon tail. He signaled. 10 shadows flowed outward. Brienne, Robin Reswell, Lady Dustin's captain, others. Davos slithered under the paling with 5 Stormland archers. Gendry hefted hammer like a silent trebuchet. Jon crept to the first wagon, its bronze bindings etched in glyphs resembling writhing vines. A thin vibration tremored the wood like a heartbeat. Needle glittered. Arya emerged from darkness behind the second wagon. She tapped hilt to forearm twice. 3 prisoners inside. Jon whistled thrush low and clear. Arrows loosed. The sentry toppled with feathered throat. Brienne surged through the gate. Steel rang once, twice. Jon swung himself onto a wagon bed, cut lashings, canvas peeled. Within, a black stone sphere big as a man's chest lay in straw, its surface veined red and pulsing slow. He set palm to it, heat like banked coals. Images pricked his vision. Waves swallowing Oldtown, streets flooded with green fire. He swore, hefted the sphere. It weighed like grief. Into the well, he called. Gendry and 2 Northmen rolled a barrel aside, revealing the yard's stone wellhead. Together they muscled the sphere, shoved. It thudded, sliding over rim, whirred in descent, then struck water far below with hiss and steam burst. A elm of scalding vapor belched up, scorching rafters. Jon felt heat through leather, but the humming stuttered, faltered, died. Arya freed villagers trussed behind hay bales. One, a woman with straw and gray hair, sobbed when Ghost nudged her wrist where the serpent mark bled. Gendry stared at the well, as if measuring his soul's depth. Later, Bran examined the mark by lantern glow. Order of the Green Hand perverted, he murmured. Someone bends their rights toward cataclysm. Sam met them next evening at the Honeywine Ford, eyes wide behind steamed spectacles. He had ridden through the night with 3 novices and a half-full wagon of books, bound in iron clasps. More text vanish daily, Sam said while hugging Bran. Glass candles blaze every dusk in the white Sphinx vault, but only red. Archmaester Valar slipped on marble stairs, cracked skull. His voice shook. No accident, ink written on his door. Open the door that cannot close. Jon braced Sam's shoulder. We close it first. They entered Oldtown under banners newly sewn, direwolf stag entwined, the quill crossing a torch. The citadel's many-windowed towers loomed mist-wreathed. Hightower Beacon blazed violet at its summit, an unnatural hue that made sailors whisper. Within the city, election fever gripped taverns and market squares. Bakers offered circle cakes, ringed by sugared almonds. Smiths hammered council pins, 5 interlocking rings around a budding tree. Yet behind festive distraction, Jon sensed tension. Hightower guards doubled, septons preaching doom, rumors of glowwine turning blood black. A council of archmaesters received Bran, Jon, and delegates in the conclave cloister. A marble court open to salt wind. Owls perched on lintels, their hoots echoing. Sam unrolled maps showing heat blooms across the reach, sites where leech ritual murders preceded stolen relics. Obsidian shards, dragon glass goblets, seeds from black bark trees. Archmaester Ibros, cheeks zagging like spent wineskins, voiced the room's dread. Someone reweaves the dance of dragons into a new tapestry soaked in blood. These so-called verdant redeemers lure villagers with promise of harvest miracles, then drain them for alchemy. Jon spoke of the sphere in the well. Abros paled. Dragon egg forged not of shell, but obsidian dust and wildfire salts. A mimic, yet if quickened it might venom enough force to shatter Oldtown's walls. Bran laid a withered leaf on the map. Seeds, he said. They mean to plant fear until the moot withers. Stop the sours, the realm may bloom. Gendry slammed hammer half to tiles. We break their forge. A novice named Miriel revealed the Redeemer's hidden kiln, a decommissioned Tyrell lime quarry near Bitterbridge. Jon divided the host once more. Gendry and Lady Dustin's riders south to smash the kiln, while Bran, Jon and Sam remained to guard election days in Oldtown. Arya slipped east on a fisher's skiff, chasing rumor of Marwyn sighted on the Shield Islands. 2 nights later, Jon walked the dockfront with Grey Worm, who had anchored unsullied ships in the Honeywine estuary to watch, as he said. They spoke over mugs of kelp broth beneath swinging lanterns. "Priestess claims dragon freeze," Grey Worm said. "Unsullied sea, only chains of fear." Jon sipped, gaze on water glinting beacon purple. "Fear sells easier than hope." "Hope needs teeth," Grey Worm answered. "If Circle fails, who guards free folk?" Jon met his eyes. "Maybe us, together." Grey Worm's stern mask cracked the smallest fraction. Acknowledgement, perhaps. He extended a scroll sealed with unsullied sigil. "Charter of conduct for soldier votes," he said. "You review." Jon accepted. Behind them, Ghost snarled softly at the darkness upriver. A low boom answered, distant but deep. Lanterns flickered. The Hightower's violet beacon pulsed brighter, then flared white as noon. Bells clanged. They ran for the city gate. A wave of screaming small folk surged outward, eyes wide, some bleeding from ears. Over rooftops, a column of purple-white flame spiraled skyward from the Sept district. Jon vaulted a cart, shouting orders. Grey Worm barked unsullied into shield wall, parting the crowd. At the flame's base, Jon found a plaza cratered, cobbles molten to glass. In its hollow floated a shard of black stone spiking with violet arcs, another obsidian sphere. This one split open, heart exposed like a fiery seed. The heat drove men back blistering, yet no smoke rose, only light. Bran arrived borne by 2 guards, Podrick hauling chair. He stared into the vortex, unblinking. "They cracked it wrong," he murmured. "Energy leaks raw, seeps into minds." Indeed, folk at Plaza Edge raved, some laughing, others clawing faces. Sam fetched sheaves of elaborate sigils, Valyrian ward runes. Bran recited directions while Jon and Grey Worm placed copper plates at cardinal points, ignoring searing flare. When last plate sank, Bran spoke a word in torn Valyrian older than dragons. The shard imploded, soundless. Light recoiled into a pearl the size of a tear and winked out. Night rushed back, and knees buckled across the plaza. Sam splashed vinegar over cobbles to quench residual heat. In the sudden hush, they heard gulls crying over the river, as though dawn already came. 20 dead. 50 maimed. Hundreds shaken. But Oldtown still stood. At council dawn, delegates gathered in starry Sept nave, where the patterned floor depicted the 7 dawn. Small folk chosen by lot stood beside lords under vaulted blue, strewn with golden stars. Jon addressed them from the crossing, voice hoarse but sure. "Last night fear burned," he said, "but walls held because people stood together, unsullied, maesters, cobblers, beggars. Circle begins now. Vote not for crowns, nor for terror's promise, but for neighbors." Ballots cast in crystal bowls glowed faint. Septry trick for secrecy. At dusk, Sam tallied beneath witness. 5 delegates emerged. Lady Eleanor's steward Sir Hugh, Miriel the novice, a lamplighter named Pate, Grey Worm by acclamation of the city's freedmen, and Archmaester Ibros representing faith and learning both. Their first unanimous act: establish river patrols to intercept alchemic cargo. Bran smiled. A thin sunrise after storm. The Reach, at least, had chosen routes. A raven brought grim tidings. Gendry's host crushed Redeemer kiln but lost 20 when booby-trapped cistern erupted green flame. Gendry survived, hammer shattered, beard singed. Jon sent word of thanks and told him to rally at Field of Fire for the moot. Meanwhile, Arya rode between spray-lashed shield islands. She tracked Marwyn to a sea cave on Greenshield, where strange runes pulsed inside basalt. She slipped through kelp-strewn passage and saw the Archmaester crouched before a tripod, distilling glowing ichor from powdered obsidian. Shadows writhed on cavern walls, tall, winged, twisting. Arya crept close enough to hear his mutter. Door swings both ways, blood for blood, flame for flame. Needle descended. tip at his throat before he heard. Marwyn started, dropping vial that shattered fiery green. Arya hissed for silence. He did not struggle. "Girl of many faces," he rasped. "You would stop Dawn?" "Stop madness," she replied. "Your redeemers kill farmers, not tyrants." "They play at sermon," he spat. "I need only knowledge. With mirror flame I tame shadow, bind doom forever." She forced him seaward where a skiff waited, sailed by a woman in tattered red silk. Melanie, freed yet watched. Arya mistrusted her, but Bran's order had brought the priestess along. Witness, atone. Back in Oldtown, Marwyn under guard revealed the Redeemer splinter. True leaders hid beyond Valyria, forging Crown of Ash to summon spirit of Balerion through pyromemory. They required final offering at the Field of Fire during the Great Moot. Union of Delegates blood. Jon's suppressed shudder. Saw wheels of fate tighten. "Then the moot is trap and test both," he told Bran. "We go still." 6 moons dwindled to 2. Sansa's ravens told of calm ballots in the north. Vale delicate yet holding. Riverlands nearly agreed. Dorne proved stubborn. 3 sand stewards contested, but finally chose Princess Inez Martell, a scholar of water rights. Ironborn elections messy. Captains sinking rivals mid-vote, yet Asha's hand prevailed. Jones' host quit Oldtown beneath banners woven bright, rings and direwolf at center. Unsullied marched alongside Northmen. Reach levies provided barley bread. Sailors cheered Bran, rolling past. At Bitterbridge Crossroads, Jon met Gendry returning. He offered the smith a new hammer forged from melted Redeemer manacles, a symbol heavy in both senses. Gendry gripped it, chin firm. They crossed the Blackwater north of ruins, where the shattered sphere still smoked underwater. Tyrion awaited with caravan of supplies and lists of southern delegates. He looked older, quill tucked behind ear. King of ledgers. The moot field cleared, he said. Dug latrines, pitched tents, hired minstrels to tune tempers. If war erupts, at least the songs will rhyme. Davos clapped his shoulder, a cynic with hope under the crust. Realm might yet rise. The final weeks ripened like fruit left long on branch, sweet yet near spoilage. Camps dotted the rolling plain where Aegon's fire once fused topsoil to glass. Farmers harvested grain at edges, wary of so many steel points. Vendors hawked fried locusts, sweet wine, tiny carved circles. Preachers shouted. Mummers parodied crowns and circles alike. Jones' pavilion stood central, plain wool, open on 4 sides. He refused dais. Delegates convened days before formal moot, drafting articles. Disputes flared. Ironborn wanting salt rights, Dornish demanding river irrigations, Reach insisting on seedbank under joint stewardship. Bran mediated by silence. When he finally spoke, objections stilled as though wind changed. One dusk gray worm approached Jon, helm under arm. "Unsullied elect new leader when danger passes," he said. I stepped down. Jon frowned. "Stay. You guide soldiers toward peace." Grey Worm watched banners flap died. "Soldiers follow idea, not man. You carry idea now." Jon clasped his forearm. "Then fight with me still, as friend." Grey Worm nodded once. "Friend." Evening fires dotted the plain like a second sky. Jon sat with Sansa, Arya, and Sam outside Bran's pavilion sharing roast onions. Ghosts drowsed at his feet. Laughter drifted from Dornish tents, drums from Ironborn. Strange harmony. At midnight, storm clouds crawled west. Bran woke screaming, a sound none had heard from him. Jon rushed inside. Bran's eyes milky white, veins dark, breath ragged. "Fire walks in shadow," he gasped. "Ash Crown rides glass dragon." He seized Jones' wrist, showing visions. Delegates kneeling bloodied. Obsidian beast rearing, shaped by flame memories. Marwyn's voice chanting inside crystal heart. Priestess torn between faiths. Circle of roots scorched. Spear of ice answering from north. Jon steadied him until tremor passed. Bran slumped, whispering. "Dawn chooses. Mercy or fear." The great moot dawned under bruised sky. Delegates processed along earthen aisle. Each realm's banner fluttered. Direwolf, falcon, fish, rose, sunspear, kraken, stag. Small folk and soldiers ringed them thrice deep. At the circles, heart rose, a single standing stone carved overnight. Obsidian shot through with veins of red glass. No one claimed credit. Jon felt its hue. Same as the forged egg. He ordered perimeter doubled. Maesters with mirrored shields encircled the stone. Melanie, the red priestess, stood among them, lips moving in soft prayer. Tyrion opened proceedings with wry humor, reading charter, preamble. One by one, delegates debated final clauses. Eleanor's steward ceded 10% wine tithe for seed bank. Asha accepted river harbor tax in trade for salt rights. Royce agreed to rotating command of Vale Neck garrisons. Hours wheeled. Sun climbed. Clouds parted. Agreement seemed near. Then a roar split the air, deep, metallic, echoing from the stone. Fissures crawled its surface. Red glow leaked. Delegates staggered. Some Redeemer agents hidden among crowd slashed palms, flinging blood toward stone. Marwyn, bound near Jon, cried out, "Stop them! Balance breaks!" Before collapsing, Melanie stepped forward, arms upraised. "Rower, see your children choose." Her shadow stretched long, merging with cracks. Flame eddied. Jon drew Longclaw. "Circle shields," he shouted. Grey Worm, Brienne, Gendry leapt, forming ring. Arrows flew, pinning bloodcasters. But the stone burst regardless, shards spinning. In its place coalesced a shape of molten glass, dragon-like yet hollow, wings ash that shed sparks. It lunged, jaws a furnace. Delegates scattered. Grey Worm hurled spear into the maw. Glass melted around shaft, but creature slowed. Bran's chair rolled into Jon's back. His voice rose calm through chaos. "Memory binds flame. Speak true names." Sam, clutching ancient scroll, began reciting lineage of dragon lords lost. Names Alos, Cereza, Triceron, each a note that dimmed the beast's glow. Jon added Lyanna, Ned, Daenerys. Human names weighted with love. Sansa shouted mothers of Wintertown. Gendry roared names of smiths. Grey Worm intoned freed brothers fallen at Marine. Each name a thread, weaving net unseen. The glass dragon shrank, light sputtering. Arya dashed beneath it, carving sigil on belly with Valyrian dagger taken from Night King long ago. Circle within circle. The beast convulsed, cracked, collapsed in rain of dull shards. Silence enveloped the field of fire. Ash drifted like gray snow. Jon's chest heaved. Blood speckled his brow. Shard cut. Around him, delegates stood slowly. No one raised sword anew. Tyrion limped to shattered pile. Kicked fragment. "Has my vote changed?" he quipped hoarsely. A nervous laugh rippled outward until, improbably, the field echoed with hearty laughter. Relief raw and wild. Jon helped Bran forward. Bran's palm touched the largest shard. It crumbled, releasing gentle whisper like distant surf. "The past burns," Bran said, "but from its ash rises choice. Are we ruled by fear of such flame, or by hope that turned it aside?" Delegates faced their people, crowded of thousands who had watched courage defeat conjured terror. Grey Worm raised ragged spear. "I cast my vote. Circle stands." One by one votes affirmed. Unanimous. The charter sealed on parchment of layered birch. Sam signed first as witness. Bran second, though not delegate. Jon, as protector, signed last, then laid quill aside. A cheer rolled across plain, caught by hills, flung to horizon. Banners dipped. Bells carried from hastily raised camp towers. That night fires blazed friendly, not fearful. Each realm's food shared, salt cod with Dornish peppers, arbor wine with North stewed jarwai. Dancers turned the trampled field joyous. Ghost dozed near children pulling his ears. Jon stood at crest watching. Arya joined, eyes reflecting flames. "Tomorrow you sail west?" he asked. After goodbyes, she nudged shoulder. "You did it. We did. He breathed wood smoke and night blooming rose. But work's only begun. She grinned. Always is. Far off, unsullied ships hoisted lanterns. Grey Worm directed engineers, building votive garden where stone burst. A grove to plant new saplings from every realm. Brienne sparred children with wooden swords. Gendry hammered horseshoes at open forge. Sansa drafted grain roots with reach steward by ale cask. Davos taught orphans dice. Bran sat beneath canvas, eyes half closed, hand resting on root of a sapling already sprouting from turned soil. He looked up as Jon approached. "Circle holds," Bran said, more statement than praise. "For now. It will fray," Bran admitted. "But threads will reweave. That is life." Jon knelt, voice low. "What of Pulson far north?" Quiet. For a time, our mercy echoed there too. Jon exhaled. "Will you stay part of council?" Bran's gaze drifted to stars. "I will wander the routes. Council seated, protector crowned by people. My path withdraws." Jon grasped his brother's hand. "Thank you." Bran's smile faint as first snow. "Remember, choose mercy, each dawn." He wheeled away into shadow where torchlight met night. Following day, delegates dispersed bearing saplings from the grove. Jon rode to each camp, exchanging vows to meet annual circle. No crown on his brow, only leather band plaited of grass by fisher children during feast. He kept it rather than the golden circle Tyrion offered, much to dwarfs' exasperation. Months unfolded. Roads reopened. Small folk councils elected reeves. Kingdom taxes pooled into seed bank. Ironborn raiding eased under chartered trade. Red priests fractured between zeal and humility after Melanie preached new creed of balance. Marwyn resigned Archlink, devoting life to guarding forge ruins. Winter's approach gentled. Snows modest, storehouses fuller. Some credited new gods, others new king, others sheer luck. None wholly wrong. Jon visited every realm before first frost, listening more than ruling. At night he dreamed less of burning shadows, more of open doors. When he finally returned to Winterfell, the godswood rustled welcoming. Sansa greeted him with ledger of bountiful harvests and a letter from Arya sent by Swallowhawk. "Sunset has edges but sea keeps going. I'll write when I find where it stops." He smiled, tucked letter in cloak. That evening he walked ramparts alone. Stars glittered. Aurora streamed faint green. Dance of light and ice. Ghost pressed warm against his thigh. He spoke to the wind though no one stood beside him. 5 hours, or 5 lifetimes, the road keeps. But for this moment, there is peace. None one. Below in courtyards, children practiced speeches for winter moot, debating roof repairs versus new sleds. Their laughter floated upward, and the walls listened, ancient stones absorbing hope like thaw water after long cold. Jon stayed to hear every echo until the last torch guttered, then descended into halls bright with hearth glow, carrying dawn's promise within him, though night's cloak lay thick. Somewhere far beyond, in forests where white trees whispered, a root slipped deeper into loam, anchoring realms anew. And if distant ice or forgotten flame stirred again, they would find a circle waiting, hands joined, names remembered, hearts pledged to mercy over fear. The night held calm. The king who was not a king breathed it, and for the first time in long years allowed himself a quiet, unguarded smile. T.A. Moonrise whisked its pale reflection across the still moat of Winterfell. And the planks of the wooden drawbridge glimmered faint silver where melting frost had darkened the grain. Jon walked those planks slowly. The soft thud of his boot heels pulled into watery echoes below. The night was windless. Fires banked along the curtain wall described quiet amber beads, and the old keep seemed to lean back to back with its own shadow, breathing in time with the steady hiss of braziers. Somewhere in the kennels, a pup loosed a single, high-strung yip. Ghost answered with the gentlest chuff, a warning and a reassurance both. And the pup immediately fell silent, as though reminded that the world was watched by larger eyes. Jon tipped his face to the sky. The aurora that had wavered earlier Coast green silk tossed by giants, had faded to a faint comb of spear points. Stars blazed through in serried ranks. Looking up, he thought again how thin the difference felt between wonder and dread. Both arrived in the same hush, both lifted the hair on the arms, both asked the heart to beat either faster or slower, but never at its ordinary pace. The realm, for the first time in living memory, idled at an ordinary pace, and the unfamiliarity of that left him restless as a horse tasting the bit. He crossed under the gate arch to the outer bailey. There the fieldstone still smelled of the day's farrier fire, and the dark came spiced with iron filings and singed hay. 2 sentries marked his passing only with nods. No salute, no hail of your grace, and that pleased him. He had spent the journey north refusing a retinue, refusing titles. Here in the yard, where children were now permitted to train with blunted sticks well into dusk, he wished to remain merely John for 1 more hour before parchment and court overtook the dawn. Past the stables, he saw a halo of lamplight burn behind the shutters of the counting house. Sansa, of course, still awake. Scribes might keep the ink fresh, but letters to a dozen holdfasts and 3 Southern Harvest Guilds needed her signature. He pictured her there, elbow propped, fingers stained, sleeves rolled to the elbow while emberfoot tea cooled beside the inkwell, and he wondered whether the weight she bore felt lighter or heavier in these golden weeks of peace. He would ask at breakfast. For now, he slipped by. The godswood waited, not calling, only breathing. He found the gate unlatched, the latchpin wrapped in a twist of fox sinew to keep it from clacking. He sighed at that small courtesy. Arya had taught the caretakers that noise in sacred places was offense to neither gods nor men, but to listening beasts. He pushed through, letting the snow-speckled mulch swallow his tread. Within, the heart tree glimmered faint. The lantern Sansa ordered hung low in its lower branches, hooded so the flame pointed only downward, reminding, not blinding. John knelt, as he always did. Sap had crusted fresh at the carved eyes, turned brittle in the night's bite, so the faces looked tearless for once. A prayer formed on his lips. The old one, scarcely words. Let them be warm, let them be safe, but he felt self-conscious. What need had he now to beg? The worst was over. The realm had chosen its circle. Even the deep north slept easy. A figure detached from the bowl's far side. Bran, wheels muffled with felt, let the chair idle on its thick rear rims so the front casters lifted off earth. His cloak lay across his knees like a still pool of moonlight. I did not mean to wake you, John said. You didn't. Bran's eyes reflected the lantern rim in perfect golden crescents. The roots keep me from long sleep. Dreams. Conversations. He cocked his head, as though listening to a distant flute. They gossip much, these saplings you've planted. John huffed. Let them cheat at dice if they like, so long as they stay planted. Bran steepled thin fingers. Roots go deeper than we guess. Do you remember the tomb Stallwood used for his larder 3 winters ago? The buried vault beneath the cooper's yard? Aye? There's new growth cracking its ceiling. White roots, fine as hair, but in 20 seasons they will pry the stones apart. Life reclaims forgotten caverns. His gaze sharpened. So too in men. Caverns unlit open slowly. But they open. John sank back on his haunches. Is that warning or blessing? Both. Bran smiled without mirth. I leave tomorrow. John had expected it, yet the pronouncement pinched. North? Again? Farther. There is a thin place beyond the shivering sea. Rock said to float because veins of ice below are hollow. The children's songs speak of a door there. I must listen, to be sure it stays shut, to know if it was ever shut at all. John rubbed the back of his neck. You'll travel unguarded, guarded by all that watches. No steel will serve me in such land. A beat of silence then. Stark and Targaryen once argued in your veins. Which rules your dreams now? John considered. Images fluttered, the glass dragon shattering. Villagers chanting circle hymns. Snowdrops pushing through ash under the field of fire. Neither. or both walking the same road. That road forks soon, Bran said. The Reach harvest will be grand, but the narrow sea tides run odd. Ships vanish, wind dies, and the Iron Bank presses you for tariff parity. Jon groaned. Give me a month of peace at least. You'll have as much peace as you can carry. Bran rolled forward until light from the lantern gilded the worn arms of the chair. I left something in your solar. Jon raised a brow. A map without ink, Bran clarified. It will show only what your eyes permit when the moment fits. Trust it. With that, he backed the chair. A raven flapped down, settled on the headrest, and the two figures vanished into hush. Jon listened until rustle and wheel creak faded. Above, wind stirred at last, setting the lantern sway. Shadows of branches crossed his face like bars, and he decided the night had told enough. He rose, brushed damp soil from knees, and made for the gate. Outside the godswood, footsteps quick and light approached. Davos Seaworth emerged, a gray wraith in half-mail, carrying 2 rolled scrolls beneath one arm and a wedge of cheese in the other hand. I'd hoped to catch you with both boots on, Davos said around a bite, then lifted one scroll. Raven, from White Harbor Docte. Lord Wool sailed before dawn, skirting Carhold, not war banners, but too many men for trade. Done. Wool sworn to the circle, Jon frowned. So he says. But Manderley warns the wolves lost 3 small hamlets to blight. Starvation makes folk rash. And the second scroll? From the Citadel. Archmaester Ebro sends copies of Old Andal legal rights. Seems some guilds want them weighed against the charter before they'll tithe. Says it can wait a fortnight, but we'd best read them tonight. Jon pinched the bridge of his nose. Tell Wool's outriders they're welcomed at Winterfell stores. We'll send 4 wagons of rye flour tomorrow. No interest, no oath asked. Dah. They may still fear ridicule. Then we send it quietly. Sign nothing. Davos gave that squinty grin which meant approval plated with doubt. A king who barters favors for no coin may find his purse popular. A protector who lets men's children starve will lose more than coin. See to it. Davos nodded, then paused, sniffing the air. You smell that? Jon inhaled. Wet bark, stable hay, turning frost. Then faint, too faint. Sulfur and mire. Forge fires banked hours ago. Not forge. East wind carries Dragonstone's perfume, my lord. That dinner be. Jon's skin prickled. Dragonstone was 200 leagues south, yet memory of clotted ash curled inside his lungs. He had no answer. Davos set a steady hand on his arm. We'll keep watch. Jon thanked him and walked on. But the sulfur phantom lingered. In his solar, beeswax candles guttered low. On the map table lay Bran's parting gift, a square of pale hide, edges stitched with silver thread but blank as new snow. At its center a single point of ink glimmered blue, pulsing faint. As Jon watched, the dot elongated into a thin river shape, then resolved into coastline. The shore bent like a hooked finger, the eastern promontory of the Vale. As the image sharpened, lines radiated from the coast, trembling like feelers. He touched the hide. Cold seeped through his fingertip. The feelers converged at a pinprick far from shore, mid-sea tuck. There the ink pooled, swirling into a black circle devouring its tail. Seed for seed. He had destroyed the Redeemer's last artifice, or thought so. Yet something still moved, offshore, beyond the skirts of gulls and trade galleys. He shoved breath out with a curse. Tomorrow, he would send Raven to Lord Royce, dispatch sleek longships northward, reposition Grey Worm's River patrols at Oldtown. But tonight, he would sleep. Man order to himself, not a wish. Dawn broke thin and colorless, like water drawn through a rag. Soldiers roused the yard with horse clatter. Grooms cursed. The cook's boys chased hens. Jon bathed quickly, cold by habit, then dressed in plain wool jerkin, pinning the direwolf and stag brooch at his collar. In the hall, he found Sansa and Tyrion at first meal, among spread parchments, each reading while nibbling oatcakes. They sat in mismatched silence until Jon slid onto the bench. Without preamble, Tyrion tapped a sealed cylinder. From Norvos. A trade envoy requests audience regarding wool quotas. Sansa passed him a wedge of quinces. After lunch, if you can keep your eyes open. I sleep well enough, Tyrion yawned. The trouble is waking to more ink than wine. Jon accepted the fruit. Norvos may wait. Lord Wool's ships need fodder. Ships? Sansa's eyes flicked. I thought the wolves were sheepfolk. They're whatever sails keeps the clan alive this winter. Jon relayed Manderly's warning. Bran's map. The scent of sulfur. Tyrion pushed back his plate. Dragonstone's sky vents smoke week-long. Prevailing winds could carry trace scents north. Or pirates refine oils for lampblack. Let us pray it's dull. Jon rose. Hope rides a swift horse, dwarf, but seldom outruns fact. Whatever stirs east of the Vale, we answer before it thrives. Ready fast galleys. Grey Worm heads a squadron south tomorrow. I follow in 2 days by Raven if need be. Sansa, keep the wool affair quiet. That Orden down her. She lowered her gaze to parchment. Flower wagons leave by dusk. Jon squeezed her shoulder, gratitude beyond words, and strode toward yard. Ghost intercepted, tail lashing. Jon knelt, burying fingers in winter-thick ruff. Watch her, he whispered. The direwolf licked his knuckles, then trotted after Sansa. By noon, scurrying Northmen loaded rye flour and hard cheese under tarp. By dusk, ravens feathered to outrider posts. And by midnight, Jon lay wrapped in wool blankets. But his mind voyaged under moonlit seas. The voyage south proved swift. Grey Worm's flagship, Unbent Mercy, sliced foam under stiff northeasterlies. Jon studied the sea at dusk, the deck rising and sinking under his boots in slow, reliable rhythm. Gulls shadowed the stern until cold drove them back. He kept watch with a spyglass improved by a citadel lens. Through it, the horizon bulged ever so slightly as though waiting to birth secrets. 3 nights out, they encountered the first derelict. A brave Osikog adrift, sails limp, no lantern shining. A longboat boarded. The crew found decks crusted white with salt as though boiled in brine. No bodies. No cargo. In the hold, barrels of pickled lampreys had burst. The stench fouled the boarding party's cloaks for hours. Jon ordered the vessel set aflame. Better ashes than plague. Yet the soaked timbers would not catch. When they finally took torch to the rigging, the ropes hissed green before flaring violet. Odor sharp as vinegar. Grey Worm washed impassively. Alchemists. Or something older, Jon muttered. We press on. Past the fingers they entered churning waters where 2 currents met. Here, the glassy sea of summer ran under the storm chop of autumn. It was upon this uneasy belt that the spyglass at last found a shape. An islet no larger than a merman's, back, flat, carved with pale stone pylons. And moored beside it, almost hidden by mists. A craft unlike any in known fleets. Slender hull, jointed in plates of what looked like fused obsidian. Sails woven of a faintly luminescent cloth. No flag. Jon tasted iron on his tongue. Silent running. Lower small boats. Grey Worm selected 10 unsullied, each with padded oar to muffle dips. Jon insisted on joining, though Grey Worm frowned. But protest died unsaid. They had fought ash dragons together. They rode beneath fog. The island smelled of sand wet too long, of weeds dredged from fissures. At the quay's end a pier extended, beams mottled with strange scallop barnacles. Jon touched one. It retracted, leaving residue like cold wax. Toward the pylons. Each block tower stood waist high, surface carved in spiral grooves. In the center, a depression served as fire pit perhaps, now cold. Scattered round it lay objects. Shards of black glass, lengths of chain fused into one another, a half-melted circlet shaped as Ouroboros. Unsullied fanned out. Jon knelt at a shard, lifted it. The edge cut air fine as promise. Inside the glass faint motes glowed amber, then winked. He sensed memory trapped, but not his to read. Grey Worm called from shoreward side. Jon rounded a pylon, found him crouched by a trench cut across packed sand. Within the trench were bodies. 5, maybe 6, contorted, skin and ivory translucence. They wore robes of coarse green weave, the Redeemer shade, and upon each brow someone had pressed a star-shaped brand before death, mouths sealed by wax. Their blood fed something, Grey Worm said softly. But what ended them after? Jon looked seaward. The dark hull still rocked. Suddenly, a light guttered behind its port. Blood-red spark, then gone. Unsullied lock shields. Jon raised 2 fingers. They advanced. The ship loomed. Its boarding ladder hung stiff, struts jointless. Up they went. Deck empty. Amidships a glass cylinder rose, capped by metal plate. Beneath the plate, faint thrumming. Jon laid ear to hull plank, heard inside a noise like wind in deep chimney, yet rhythmic, breathing. Alive? He circled, found hatch. Grey Worm signaled caution. Together they heaved. Inside a stair wound down into gloom. They descended. The space felt wrong. Too wide for hull, as though walls stretched by trick of perspective. At bottom lay a pool. Brine or something thicker, black as night. Suspended above, chains held a cocoon woven of translucent fibers. Within it, a silhouette curled, knees to chest. Jon's heart pitched, size of adolescent child. Deep. No movement. A brazier flickered under the cocoon, flames green-black, heating but not burning the shell. A living egg, Grey Worm surmised. Human mold. Jon's stomach churned. He pictured dragon seed forged from man's marrow, Redeemer gospel twisted anew. Mercy or fear. He felt Longclaw's weight and knew any strike might spill what they could not contain. Behind them, stair creaked. A figure in red silk descended, Melanie. She had insisted on birth in the hold of unbent mercy as penance witness, but Jon had confined her. Now she slipped past unsullied blades, palms uplifted. You travel faster than guards, Grey Worm growled. I walk the light on ways you do not mark. Her eyes gleamed sapphire in the unnatural flame. Harm not the child of no mother. Jon stepped between her and the brazier. Explain. He is answer to prayer provoked by blasphemy. Redeemers sought fire god and blood, but the sea answered. Not roar lore, not storm. Something deeper. It listens. Something drowned men worship? Jon asked. Older than even they. She pointed at cocoon. It called those fools after they fractured Dreamglass, promised them harvest, then muzzled them into service. Now, it must be judged. Mercy or fear you choose. Nodding. Jon examined Melanie's thin face. Whatever madness clung earlier seemed burned off by new conviction. But conviction and truth seldom wed. He turned to Grey Worm. Douse flame. They shoveled sand from jar. Smothered brazier. Thrumming fell to hush. The cocoon pulsed once, then sagged. Melanie cried out. Half plea, half curse. Jon ignored. He chased the sand with a gourd of freezing seawater. Steam hissed. The shell dulled. Silhouette faded. The air grew silent. As tomb. Jon's shoulders slumped. Grey Worm exhaled. Melanie knelt, pressing fist to brow. You have chosen, she whispered. Jon thought of Bran speaking roots go deeper. He looked at vessel's walls, the trench, the jar. It all reeked of manipulations by hands unseen. He could not know whether mercy or fear had guided him, only duty. But he must craft story for the realm. They towed the obsidian craft behind the flagship, scuttling it halfway, ensuring no salvage. The cocoon they consigned to Sea Flame Funeral, sealed in tarred crate, then set aflame with lantern oil. The pyre hissed, sank, vanished. Whether that freed or trapped the thing inside, no telling. Oldtown welcomed them under pewter sky. Lord Royce had mobilized harbor watch. Warships from Bravos sat anchor. Banker envoys seeking news of the lost cog. Jon met them civil, told half-truth. Rogue alchemists, danger diffused. The Bravosi pressed for inspection rights. Jon deferred to Circle Charter. Cases of sorcery to be weighed by full council. They left, dissatisfied, promising interest hikes. Tyrion would groan. But coin must not steer mercy. Ghost rejoined, muzzle dusted with hill soil. He had run the Crescent Cliffs chasing ptarmigan. The sight steadied Jon more than any treaty ink might. Back at Winterfell, news awaited. Lord Wool's men safe, blight traced a fungal curse of wet grain. The rye wagons fed them, blight resolved by burn and salt. Sansa wrote victory in humility at the report margin. Beyond wall, Tormund sent message. Ice lakes cracking earlier. Fish plentiful, though an odd hum beneath at night. He requested 3 smiths to fix lure hooks. Jon dispatched them with cordial note. Bran's leaflet map he pinned to solar wall. Its ink no longer shifted. The Vale coast faded. New blotches swam over Doran's salt shore, but dim, waiting for eyes to see. He left it. Seasons edged onward. Winter came mild, snow dusting fields like lazy baker shaking sugar. The seed bank in the reach germinated barley earlier. Dorne's waterworks pumped to parched marches. The Iron Islands exported cured eel in exchange for vineyard cuttings. The Charter's first taxes furnished a scholar's hall in King's Landing where small folk read decrees aloud. Arguing freely, Tyrion became its most scandalous guest lecturer. Jon traveled realm again in spring. He visited Pike to mediate dispute over salvage rights, spent 2 nights at Sunspear coaxing Martell cousins to share drainage designs. Rode through the Stormlands where orchard keepers had carved the circle sigil into bark of oldest pair. At each stop he declined pomp. He slept beneath wagon canvas among guards, who now sang odes to the king who wore no crown but carried the world's rent in flour sacks. Grey Worm remained north, instructing new realm watch drawn from barons of every district. Circle Guard they called themselves. They swore not to lord nor coin, but to charter. Brienne took command of their training. Her laughter, once rare, now rang across practice yards. On eve of midsummer, Jon sat by campfire near Ashford. Gendry hammered horseshoes under an oak. Davos whistled lullaby. Jon watched sparks pinwheel upward and wondered whether the world truly mended or only shifted sigh. His hand found carved grass circlet, still in pouch. He weighed it, light as promise, fragile as season. Footsteps approached. Sam, cheeks flushed, waving fresh parchment. A raven tree leaf, he panted. From the other side of the world. Jon accepted. The seal, stark direwolf overlaying a compass rose, Arya's device, found water beyond water. Stars flip like mirror. No edge yet. Tell Bran roots reach here. Trees with silver hearts and leaves like black fire. We'll send seeds. Alive and laughing. Aegon smiled broader than moon. He passed letter round. Davos slapped knee. Gendry whooped, showering sparks. The night hummed with friendship, unafraid. Later, alone, Jon wrote reply. The world inside circle beats steady. Bring stories to warm our winter. Mercy holds. He sealed it in blank hide, trusting winds east and turned to sky. The aurora again danced, this time purple and green. Lovely, harmless. Clouds hid sulfur scent, only wood smoke and wildflowers. Thank you, he whispered. Perhaps to gods, perhaps to ghosts. No answer came, except breeze rustling grass. But that was enough. And in the high north, where Bran rode atop a woolly shagyak across alabaster flats, he lifted face to same lights, and felt the words brush his mind like feathered snow. He smiled, and the roots beneath sighed content. The circle endured. Years wheel onward, tales branch like kindling. Some burn hot, some feed soil. But in those hours, with kingdoms tilled by trust, no sword rang louder than laughter, and children born under starlit tents learned the charter before their letters. When at last ghosts of dragons stirred again, and they surely would, they found not a throne waiting, but hands joined, voices tall, a circle unbroken. Through mercy, the realm remembered its name, and through memory, it walked into dawn. Each step an ordinary miracle, each breath proof that fear, once faced, folds into dust light enough for hope to blow away on summer wind. Oh, A.G. Morning came gently to the world, and with it came the slow swelling chorus of birds in Winterfell's ancient trees, their songs refracting through the towers and the narrow winding ways between outer and inner walls. The snow had melted from the bailey, revealing flagstones slicked clean by rain and the purposeful scrubbing of stable girls. Jon was awake before the first bell, not out of duty, but habit. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands folded, eyes closed, breathing with the evenness that had once soothed ghosts in fitful nights of northern wind. There was quiet at the heart of the great castle, not the hush of fear or mourning or old suspicions. Jon knew those silences well. This was a quiet of expectation, of things growing just below the surface, like barley swelling in dark earth or a river swelling unseen under late winter ice. The circle's second gathering approached, set to occur in the green spring fields of Riverrun, and Jon found himself both content and restless. A man whose hands remembered the grip of sword, but who now wielded parchment, patience, and the soft alchemy of compromise. He dressed simply, knotting the plain wool at his throat, fastening the badge at his shoulder, the pin of the circle. 5 interlocking rings and a dire wolf's head at center, shaped from salvaged steel and river pearls. He paused a moment, feeling the cool weight, the honesty of it, then left the chamber behind. The Solar was awake before him, Sansa and Tyrion at the big table, charts and scrolls unrolled like the river deltas of the Reach. A breeze moved through the chamber, fragrant with mint from the gardens. Sansa looked up, green eyes crinkling in a smile that was all North and all Mother. Tyrion was already at his second cup, face shadowed by the mountains of ledgers. "Will you join us, Lord Protector?" Tyrion asked, voice sly. "Or is today a day for simply walking and letting the rest of us drown in numbers?" Jon pulled out a chair, easing into the familiar dance. "If the numbers grow too deep, build a raft. Or send for Gendry. He'll hammer the sum straight." Sansa's smile broadened, then faded, replaced by a furrow of concern. "There's unrest in the marshes by the neck again. Reed's folk say poachers have slipped down from the western hills, cutting traps and stealing the spring catch. Nain. Reed's folk don't complain unless there's a real wound," Jon mused. "Send word we'll meet them halfway. No one's to starve when the river is full." He made a note, quick strokes of charcoal. "And the delegates? Riverrun expects all realms to arrive a fortnight hence. The Reach, Riverlands, Vale and Dorne are already on the roads. Gendry rides from Storm's End with Lady Brienne and the new Circle Guard. The Ironborn sail the Green Fork, not the Trident, this year." Sansa looked faintly troubled. "Some say it's because the new Lord Harlaw dreams of white krakens." "Let him dream," Jon replied. "Dreams haven't sunk a meeting yet. Only hunger and pride do that." His smile was soft, uncertain. "Let's keep them fed and humble if we can." Tyrion raised his cup. "To humble lords. May they be more plentiful than dragons." Jon grinned, took a slice of apple, and chewed in thoughtful silence. The sun angled across the table, illuminating the new map of Westeros. Each region marked by small carved stones. A circle token for every holdfast in town. Each line a path newly won. Not by conquest, but by choice. It was a fragile thing, this balance, but it felt more solid to Jon than any crown ever had. The road south to Riverrun was a river of banners. Jon rode among the people, not before them, and Ghost prowled nearby, a spectral reassurance to children and a warning to would-be thieves. Sansa rode in a closed carriage with Maester Myriel and Lady Barbary Dustin, discussing grain tithes and the maintenance of the river levees. Tyrion traveled on a sturdy pony, regaling the small folk with tales of dragons and the time he'd nearly drowned in a cask of Arbor gold. The procession moved unhurried, pausing in villages where the banners of House Stark and the circle now hung side by side from tavern lintels and smithy doors. On the third night, they made camp by the Tumblestone, just west of the ferry. A fire burned in the center of the ring, and as the dusk deepened, folk from nearby farms came with baskets of eggs, fresh bread, and a cask of beer. Jon sat with them, sharing the meal, listening more than he spoke. The farmers talked of wolves hunting the hills, of a new teacher in the village who taught children the circle's code as easily as the old prayers, of their pride that no tacksman had come to shake down the poor since the moot at the Field of Fire. One old woman, her hair long as a maiden's, approached John after supper. "My son fought for Tarley at the Blackwater," she said. "Lost his hand. He builds plows now for the new Reachman. Says he's never been more proud nor more tired." John smiled, shaking her hand, calloused and warm. "That's all we hope for. Pride and tired hands. Not swords and lost sons." She nodded, then pressed a silver penny into his palm, the old king's face barely legible. "A gift," she whispered, "to bury with the past." He pocketed the coin, heart heavy and light at once. Riverrun shimmered in green and gold, its towers garlanded in spring flowers, the banners of House Tully rippling with the circle's new crest. The lords of the realm arrived in waves. Edmure Tully rode out with a line of boatsmen. Lady Eleanor Tyrell's steward presented a sheaf of barley taller than himself. Prince Coran Jourdain came in a barge painted sunset red. The Ironborn were last. Asha Greyjoy striding through the gates with 3 captains in her wake, and a net full of silver eels slung across one shoulder. The moot convened in the riverside meadow, a great ring of seats cut from standing oak. The delegates, 2 lords, 2 small folk, and 1 chosen by faith or guild from each realm, took their places as singers played low music, and children raced between the chairs, watched by circle guards in plain wool. John sat at the center, not on a throne, but a simple chair. Gendry and Brienne at either side. The business of the circle was plain at first. Ratify the new taxes. Approve the joint building of bridges along the Mander and the Green Fork. Hear appeals on land rights from the North and Dorne. Tyrion presided over disputes with wit and precision. Lady Eleanor's steward took notes, and Sam, now called Maester Samwell by most, read each proposed law aloud, his voice strong and sure. When voices rose too sharp, Ghost would simply yawn, displaying all his teeth, and laughter would break the tension. But on the 4th day, word arrived from the Vale. Ships sighted off the narrow sea, sails black as pitch, no flags flown. A sense of dread coiled through the moot. John called a recess and walked with Gendry and Asha along the river. "Ironborn, do you know these ships?" John asked. Asha spat into the grass. "If they flew my flag, I'd have heard. The silence means pirates or worse." Gendry hefted his hammer, eyes narrowed. "Too soon for war. The sea should be watched." Asha nodded. "I'll send a boat to shadow them. No banners means no mercy if they land." John agreed, and messengers left at once. The night before the final vote, Arya returned, her hair longer, face browned by months at sea. She found John in the stables, brushing Quiet's mane. "You look different," John said, grinning. "Older, maybe wiser." She laughed, a low sound. "Older, not wiser. But I found the world's edge. It's not an edge at all, just another horizon. There are trees, black as crows. Waters warm as blood. Folk who speak in riddles and smiles. Nader Rahar. And you? I'm home, for now. There's news." Her face grew serious. "The ships from the east, they're not traders. I think they're the last of the Redeemers, or what they became. Pilgrims, or maybe exiles. Following old signs in the sky. They talk of a new fire in the world. I heard their prayers on a beach of glass. They worship what we broke at the moot." John felt a cold shiver in his belly. "Will they fight?" "I don't think they know how to do anything else. But they're afraid too." He nodded. "Stay with us. The circle needs every eye." Dawn broke golden high. The delegates assembled in the field, small folk clustering close. Banners high, they deep. John stood, recited the new preamble. No king but the will of the many, no war but the defense of the circle, no law above mercy, and the vote began. All realms agreed. The new charter was sealed, not with blood, but with water from each great river, poured into a common bowl, then poured onto a sapling planted at the field center. The Ironborn arrived with news. The ships had anchored off the Fingers, requesting parley under truce. John called for volunteers. Gendry, Arya, Brienne, and Asha answered. They sailed at dawn, finding the black ships riding low, oars resting, hulls barnacled. The exiles who came ashore were a motley band, old, young, scarred, wide-eyed. They bore no weapons but staves, no banners but circles woven in red thread. Their leader was a woman, her voice rough with salt. She knelt before Jon, offering a stone etched with the Ouroboros. "We are no longer redeemers," she said. "We are seekers. We followed a fire, but it burned us hollow. Now we ask to settle, work the hard land, ask forgiveness for the old ways, or we'll take our ships and vanish." Then Jon listened, searching for guile, finding only exhaustion. He knelt, offered his hand. "Work the land, live in the circle. The past is heavy, but mercy is lighter. But there will be no secret rights, no lords over small folk." She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. The seekers were settled on the stony islands near the neck, under watchful eyes, but with tools, seed, and a share of the catch. Summer rolled across the land in slow green waves. The second circle proved steadier than the first, disputes fewer, harvests better, laughter more frequent in courts and fields. Arya stayed a moon, then vanished west again, leaving behind a knife and a note. "Keep your eyes open, brother. New worlds wait in every shadow." Sansa managed the stores, Tyrion the law, Sam the learning. Gendry built bridges, Brienne taught peace and defense. Grey Worm led the Circle Guard through long days, and Tormund, wandering south, visited at every festival, growing famous for stories and impossible bets. Jon traveled often, never staying too long, always listening, always choosing mercy. One autumn, a child was born in the village by the river, and the villagers named her Lyanna, after a name whispered in stories of the old kings. They asked Jon to bless her. He did, kneeling in the mud, Ghost's great head beside him, a blessing not from a king, but from a brother among equals. Time moved as it must, slow and certain. As years spun on, the circle grew. The sapling in the meadow by Riverrun became a tree, roots thickening, branches crossing banners of every realm. Beneath it, every midsummer, the moot gathered, and folk from the smallest islands to the farthest mountains sat together, breaking bread. Sometimes trouble came, as it always does, plagues, storms, new ideas clashing with old. But always, the people met it together. The world did not end, nor was it remade in a day. The past was not undone, but it was carried gently, as one carries a stone away from a field to let something new take root. Jon grew gray, then old, lines deepening around eyes that had seen too much, but never looked away. Ghost limped with age, but never left his side. Sansa's hair silvered, Tyrion's quips grew sharper. Sam's children filled the archives with laughter and the rustle of parchment. And through it all, every night, Jon walked the ramparts, looking not for danger, but for the quiet miracle of a land at peace. A peace always threatened, always fragile, but real, because the circle held, and somewhere, far beyond the rivers, in forests and on shores unnamed, Arya Stark chased new horizons, sending ravens that never failed to find their way home. When at last, Jon's steps slowed and his voice grew thin, he asked to be buried not in the crypts, but under the heart tree, with no crown or sword, only a small stone marked with a circle and a wolf. The circle endured, and the world endured with it. And the night, watching, held its breath and let it out, gentle and slow, like a new leaf unfurling in spring. Key. Spring's second bloom painted the land in veils of green and gold, poppy red and violet, washing over fields and woods until the scars of old war. Blackened trees, pitted roads, walls once broken, became only faint etchings beneath the grass. The circle's promise, so fragile in its birth, began to root itself into every waking day. A rhythm as familiar now as the tides at White Harbor or the bells at Oldtown. In villages and cities, under the banners of ancient houses and new freeholds, people greeted the season as one, planting, tending, making ready for market fairs and the gathering of stories at the solstice. In Winterfell, the heart of the north, life's new shape grew obvious even to the oldest men and the shyest children. The walls had been mended with reach stone, the windows refitted with colored glass from Lannisport, and the courtyards echoed not with battle drill but the laughter of children who raced beneath the shadow of the towers, playing at council and moot, shouting new oaths and old jokes in equal measure. Where once only lords and their sworn swords had walked, now cooks, scribes, smiths, and the odd traveling tinker debated side by side, trading tales of market price, distant kin, and the best way to keep a cow from eating the kitchen garden. Jon passed among them most mornings, his cloak cast off for simple leathers, his pin of the circle fastened over his heart with thread Sansa had spun herself. His gait was slower these days, his black hair dusted at the temples with ash, but he moved easily, shaking hands, answering questions, listening to complaints. Ghost followed at his side, older, his muzzle white, but no less keen, lending the reassurance of a silent, vigilant watch to all. When the business of Winterfell was done, Jon took counsel in the solar, but the meetings now resembled gatherings of kin more than the weighty councils of the old kings. Sansa presided over the ledger, her eyes never missing a coin's outflow or a line in the grain account. Sam, gray at the temples and full-bellied, sat with quills and a basket of fresh-baked rolls, his voice gentle as he explained the logic of new laws or the results of a distant harvest. Tyrion, whose wit had grown even drier with the years, kept a pot of Dornish wine near to hand and interrupted only to offer some heretical solution, or to mock himself, or to remind everyone not to take even their greatest successes too seriously. One morning as the sun crested the walls, Jon called them to order. The Circle's charter, now a living thing for over a decade, would be reviewed again at the coming moot. "We meet this year beneath the great tree at Riverrun," Jon announced, "and it may be the last time I stand as protector before you. The realms must vote anew." Tyrion, Sansa looked at him sharply. "The people will ask for you again." "I am not young," Jon said, and smiled, "nor the only voice worth hearing. The Circle should live past the memory of any one of us. If it cannot, it will never last." Sam nodded. "The world's changed. It needs stewards, not kings. But who do you think will step forward?" Jon shrugged. "Let them come. Let them speak. If the Circle is true, any voice strong enough for service can be heard." Tyrion grinned, swirling his cup. "Perhaps the world is finally mad enough to let a stable hand lead it. I'll drink to that. Or a wise old crone, or a cook who knows what to do with wild onions and patience. Gods know I have tasted enough ill-cooked meat at court to pray for a chef's rule." "Name?" Laughter rippled, warm and easy. Jon glanced at Sansa. "What say you, sister?" She considered, lips pursed. "The North will send a new delegate, but you are our guide. Even if your voice is only one among many." He took her hand, grateful. "Then let it be, and let's prepare to leave in a week's time." Word of the coming moot ran through the land with the swiftness of summer wind. Banners rose in villages. Circles of wheat for the reach, braided river grass in the riverlands, painted stones in the vale, shells in the isles, wolf's head brooches in the north. Where once the calling of banners meant war, now it meant gathering, and neighbors from a dozen leagues away met at crossroads and alehouses to debate which among them would represent their voice. The moot at Riverrun became a festival before it even began. Tents rose in multicolored rows along the green banks. Merchants arrived with carts stacked high. New apples from the Reach, woven tapestries from Dorne, glass from Lannisport, barley beer from the islands. Minstrels played on every corner, and children ran wild, daring each other to touch the base of the great sapling that now towered halfway to the ramparts, its roots thick as a man's thigh. Jon arrived with Sansa, Sam, and Tyrion in a modest wagon, refusing both guards and banners. Ghost headed ahead, scattering sparrows and earning delighted cries from those who had only heard tales of the giant white wolf. They were met by Lady Eleanor Tyrell, grown from a shy girl to a woman of calm command, who greeted Jon with a firm embrace and a laughing scold for staying too long in the cold north. Edmure Tully, hair gone white but his arms still strong, clasped Jon by the forearm. "You've not changed a day," he lied, and Jon laughed, answering, "Nor have you. Except you look more like your father every year." The moot opened with ceremony as old as the charter, and as simple. The circle's tokens, a new one for every town and village, were placed on the table. Nearly 1,000 now, the wood worn smooth by a decade of hands. The people of the land, lords and ladies, merchants and miners, field hands and healers, chose their delegates in open vote. A spectacle as raucous and honest as any festival. The candidates stood together at the great tree, each speaking a few words. Then the crowd marked tokens in their favor. Sometimes the winner was a familiar name. Sometimes a complete unknown. At least one was a woman who had never owned a pair of shoes. Another, a blind harpist who sang the charter by heart. The business of the moot was wide. Tithes for the seed bank, new roads in Dorne, a rule for salt trading, a petition to allow the children's wooded in the north to be open to visiting scholars. Sansa guided the Norse voice with careful tact. Tyrion played peacemaker when tempers flared. Gendry, still broad-shouldered and honest as an axe, advocated for the Circle Guard to build new barracks along the Trident. And Brienne, her hair silver now, but her arms undimmed, spoke for those who could not speak, orphans, the lost, and the broken. And Jon, as ever, listened. He listened to the old man who wept that his son, once a poacher, had become a warden for the marshes. He listened to the girl who'd sailed from Skagos with news of a new fish that fed the village through winter. He listened to the stonemason who wanted laws to protect the memory of the war, so that no boy grows to think killing is a game. There were disagreements, sometimes fierce, over taxes, over old wounds, over what debts could be forgiven and what must be paid. But always, the voices circled back to mercy, to listening, to the promise that no one would rule alone. On the final night, Arya appeared, unexpected as ever, a shadow among the lanterns. She sat beside Jon as the moot's feast began, her face drawn by sun and sea but her eyes clear. "Found the far side of the world yet?" Jon asked, grinning. She shook her head. "Only found more stories. There are people on the edge of the world who dance in circles and sing to the stars. I told them about the circle, and they laughed and told me the world is a wheel. I believed them." Jon nodded, a hand on her shoulder. "It's enough, isn't it?" "It is." Arya sipped her cup, then leaned close. "You should rest, brother. You've earned it." He smiled, not protesting. The circle's vote for protector came at dawn, on the banks of the slow-moving river. The great tree's shadow touched each delegate, each villager, each lord, as the names were read. Jon stood, hands folded, not seeking attention. When his name was called, he shook his head. His voice was only one. Instead, a surprise. The votes fell to Lady Mirielle, the former maester who had taught half the realm's children their letters, and who had healed more wounds than any maester ever sworn to Citadel. Her face turned red, then white, then calm. She stood, lifted the pin of the circle, and bowed her head. "I will serve if the circle wills it. But let us remember, the circle is not one, but many. Any hand may take up this badge if need arises." Bunny Hirsch. Jon led the applause, pride warming him, not regret. The moot broke with song, bells, and the promise of more years, of sowing, of justice, of long peace. Time moved on as it must. Sansa became known as the Wise Lady of the North, her hair a shining river of silver. Arya came and went, never staying long, always bearing news of distant places, always returning when needed most. Sam filled the libraries with new stories, tales of heroes and fools, laws and laughter. Tyrion drank and laughed and needled and ruled with a pen sharper than any sword. Gendry and Brienne built the Circle Guard into the realm's shield, a force sworn to peace above all. The Circle's tokens multiplied. The moot became a pilgrimage, a promise, a legend. Jon grew old. Ghost stayed at his side until the end. then slipped away beneath the heart tree and was seen no more. On Jon's last day, Sansa sat with him as he watched the fields ripen, the tree at Riverrun grown so wide it shaded half the moot ground. "It lasted," he whispered. Sansa squeezed his hand. "It will last longer than we ever dreamed." When he died, he was buried not under a stone, but with his circle pin pressed to his breast, and a sprig of the tree's new leaves in his hand. The circle endured. War never vanished, nor did hunger or jealousy, or the folly of men. But when darkness threatened, the people gathered, and the moot was called, and voices rose together, sometimes in anger, sometimes in song, but always together. And so the wheel kept turning, mercy balancing strength, memory balancing change. Years later, travelers from distant coasts spoke of a realm ruled not by crown or dragon or ancient sword, but by a circle, an idea as fragile as a breath and as powerful as hope. And in quiet hours, when the bells were still, those who listened could almost hear the roots of the great tree, spreading ever deeper, ever farther, until they touched every corner of the land and beyond. In the circle's embrace, the world endured and became new. Oined she. The years wore softly on the land, and each spring the light returned with more confidence, as if the world itself remembered now what it meant to awaken unafraid. In those days, a child could walk the King's Road from the crumbling towers of White Harbor to the porticoed gates of Sunspear, and see the evidence of the circle everywhere, a low stone marker at the edge of every village, etched with the 5 rings and a single wolf's head, weathered by rain but gleaming faintly with lichen and hope. New towns grew where armies once broke the land. The ruins of Harrenhal became a place of learning, its scorched stones repurposed into classrooms and archives. The children of lords and field hands alike sat side by side beneath windows thrown wide to the river breeze. The maesters called the place the College of the Root and Branch, and each year sent out a caravan of young men and women, some to the Circle Guard, some to distant ports and keeps, many to farms or ships, who carried with them a sense that every voice mattered, and every hand shaped the world. In the north, the ancient woods thickened, their wildness less feared now than cherished. Under Sansa's gentle stewardship, the old gods' groves were tended not just by Starks, but by any who wished peace. Miners, shepherds, even the odd reformed sellsword. In the deep of winter, fires blazed bright, and the stories told around them spanned all houses and all faiths. Sam became Grand Master of the Circle, though he still blushed at the title, and spent as much time in the fields and stables as in the library. His children and grandchildren played in the shadow of the White Raven Tower, chasing each other with scrolls and bread crusts, while their father lectured on the origin of wind or the nature of mercy. Sam's compendium, his great living record of every circle, moot and law, was copied and recopied, and in distant corners of the realm, in the free cities and beyond, folk debated it with as much heat as ever had filled the Red Keep in days of kings. In the south, the riverlands flourished with 3 harvests in 5 years, their canals and dikes rebuilt by hands from every part of the land, and each year the moot at Riverrun grew larger. On the islands, Asha Greyjoy's line endured, sending grain and fish to famine-struck coasts in trade for saplings and sheep. The salt-borne ways softened, but did not vanish, only joined the circle with their own stories and their old songs. Arya's name became legend. She was seen sometimes in the east, in the shadow of the Bone Mountains, or on the decks of black-sailed ships, always moving, always listening. Her hair white as sea salt by the time she was last seen. The letters she sent, sometimes once a year, sometimes less, spoke of distant storms and distant kindness, and every child in the realm learned her story, not as a lady or a queen or a killer, but as a seeker whose courage was in her leaving and her returning. Brienne and Gendry raised the Circle Guard to a force unmatched for justice. Their blue banners, once the color of war, became a symbol of refuge, and villages welcomed the sight of their riders. When trouble brewed, feud or famine, flood or blight, the Guard rode not to punish, but to mediate, to build, to plant new crops or repair roads. Each new recruit took the oath, I am not above nor below. I am beside. I hold the line for all, not one. Sansa grew wise and old, her hair a braid of silver and ice, and she remained at Winterfell, beloved by all the North and by the rest of the land besides. Her voice in council was always calm, always measured, but when the circle quarreled or the moot grew wild, it was her gentle words that quieted the storm. "We are many, but we are one," she would say. "No voice alone is enough, not even mine." The North, once proud and apart, became a wellspring of counsel, sending teachers and farmers, singers and weavers, not to conquer but to share. Jon's grave beneath a heart tree became a place of quiet pilgrimage. No temple was raised there, nor any grand monument. Each spring, a new ring of stones was placed, sometimes by children, sometimes by the old circle guard, sometimes by travelers from the edge of the world who brought pebbles from distant shores. Ghost was never seen again, but in winter, white shapes sometimes moved through the forest beyond the walls, and stories grew up that the first protector's spirit wandered still, watching, guiding, guarding. The circle changed, as all things do. Muriel stepped down when her hands grew stiff, replaced by a council of 3, then 5. Not all were wise. There were years of dispute, even of bitter argument. Famine struck once in a generation, and some lords tried to claim the old powers, or to cheat the seed bank, or to stoke ancient feuds. But the circle endured. When the rivers flooded, neighbors rebuilt. When a lord betrayed the trust, it was not swords, but the judgment of the moot that brought him to heel. Children born after the war knew only the circle. They grew up running the roads that had once been battlefield and graveyard, now shaded by new oaks and flanked by fields of rye and barley. In winter, they read Sam's tales by the fire. In summer, they played at moot and council beneath the branches of Riverrun's great tree. They learned to vote before they learned to fight. Some dreamed of adventure, and some of peace, and most of both. 100 years passed, and the world spun on. The memory of kings became story and song, a lesson more than a warning. The circle's moot, now 10,000 strong, became the great festival of the world, drawing travelers from the summer isles, from Ashai, from cities no map could find. The field at Riverrun grew so vast that it seemed to be a city of tents, and the trees' branches reached so wide that they shaded the tables of 10 realms at once. No crown was ever forged again. There were calls, once or twice, to return to old ways, to raise a war chief when the Grey Plague came from the east, or when pirates harried the arbor, or when dragons were seen in distant skies. But the circle answered with unity, not with rule, with 100 hands instead of 1 sword. When an enemy threatened, every realm sent aid. When famine came, the granaries opened. When storms battered the coast, the ships of the isles ferried supplies upriver, and the people rebuilt together. And so the land endured, not without sorrow, not without fear, but with the daily courage of people who remembered, always, that they stood together. The stones of the circle grew smooth with touch, the tokens multiplied, the archives filled. Stories became history, and history, memory. Every decade, at the moot, a new protector was chosen, not for blood or wealth, but for wisdom and service, for patience and courage, for the willingness to listen more than speak. Sometimes the protector was a woman, sometimes a man, sometimes both together or neither. Sometimes they were young, sometimes old, sometimes the unlikeliest among the circle. Each served, then stepped aside, and was thanked, and became a part of the story, not the end of it. Riverrun's great tree outlived them all. Its roots sank deep into the bones of the land, its branches soared, and every spring it flowered white and red, so that the ground beneath was bright with fallen petals. In its shade, the moot met. No walls, no throne, no barriers but the arc of the circle and the limits of the heart. And if you were to walk there, 100 years or 1,000, after Jon knelt beneath the heart tree, you might hear a voice, soft, barely more than wind, reminding you that the world is not changed by crowns or fire, but by the steady, stubborn hope of ordinary men and women. That mercy outlasts fear. That memory outlasts pain. That each hand shapes the circle, and each voice, once raised, can echo forever. And so the world remade endured, not perfect, not always easy, but true. For in the end, the song of the circle was not one of endings, nor even of beginnings, but of a road walked together, a wheel turned by many, and a peace born of patient, tireless hearts. Yeah. Seasons shifted, yet the land remained full and restless and beautiful. The college at Harrenhal was now thick with moss and wisdom, its once ruined towers woven with vines and climbing roses. Voices, not screams, echoed through its wide halls. In every province the circle's seal, 5 rings around a wolf, marked doorposts, market stones, and even, for luck, the prow of trading cogs bound for the summer isles or the stepstones. The youngest generations no longer bowed before banners, but touched the rings for luck, and it was said a child could travel from Bear Island to Sunspear, with nothing but her wits and a circle pin, and be welcomed at every fire. Yet memory is a slow river, and even as the years washed away the wounds of kings and dragons, the world's older scars would not so easily fade. Storms would still thunder over Blackwater Bay. The wall, no longer manned by black-clad crows, remained a shadow on the edge of the world. There were mysteries beyond every border, some waiting in patience, some in hunger. But the circle endured because it changed, renewing itself every year, every moot, every telling of the tale. The festival at Riverrun was now so vast it could be seen from the towers of 3 houses. Wagons camped as far as the river bent eastward, and the markets ran for a moon's turn, merchants arriving from Norvos and Lies, Mir and Old Volantis. Some sailed upriver, some arrived on foot, and every campfire burned with news, debate, and laughter. New tokens appeared. A fisherman's net nodded through a ring, a silvered stone from the mountains of Skagos, a feather from a summer isle parrot. Each bore a story, and at each moot, the children collected them, swapping tales until dawn. The moot itself was a marvel of noise and peace. Elders debated, circle guard kept order, and poets stood to recite the charter, while squires and scullions voted side by side with lords. There were disputes, there always were, but no man or woman raised a sword. The circle guard, sworn to none but the charter, bore no livery but blue and white, and were cheered in every village they passed. Sansa Stark lived to see her 70th summer. When she died, the snows fell early, and the north wept. But the moot at Riverrun fell silent for a moment, then burst into a song, every singer, every tongue. The refrain, "We are one." Gendry, too, grew old. His hammer hung on the wall of the college. The guard wore a silver badge in his memory, and he was buried in a simple grave marked with a smith's anvil and 5 stones from 5 realms. Brienne's grave was beside his, sword broken and planted, its pommel resting on a circle of small pebbles, a tradition now for every guard who died in peace. Samuel Tarley's compendium grew so vast the archives at Harrenhal overflowed. It was copied and sent across the narrow sea. Sailors brought it to Bravos and beyond, and it was said that in distant Lang, the circle's law was quoted in a dozen languages. Sam's children and grandchildren all served as scribes, and his line, though no longer noble, was honored everywhere for their love of knowledge, patience, and mercy. Tyrion Lannister, old and small and sharp as ever, saw the charter's centennial moot. When he died at 100, his ashes were scattered on the wind, as he'd requested. Let the wind carry me where coin and counsel once could not. And the archives preserved his letters, full of wit and wisdom as the Lannister dialogues. Arya was last seen at a moot, just once in her true old age. No one noticed her at first. A white-haired woman, hooded, with the walk of a dancer. She sat among the circle guard, shared ale with children, and listened to the moot. At sunset she stood beneath the tree and recited an old verse. A road is made by walking, and never ends. Then she was gone again, leaving only a shell necklace on the route. Some said she sailed west forever. Others that she vanished into the far woods north of Skagos. Her story became the circle's own, A promise of returning, of seeking, of always moving on. The circle itself changed in small ways, then great. The number of realms rose to 9, as the Summer Islands sent delegates, and 3 great towns in the Vale, tired of lords, petitioned to stand as their own voice. The moot grew to 50,000, delegates, families, farmers, minstrels, cooks. New rules were needed, and were made, debated, rewritten. But the heart of the circle endured. No voice above another. Every dispute judged in the round, with memory and mercy before all. The world changed. The climate warmed. The southern rivers flowed longer. Grapes grew on hills where sheep once grazed. Ships of strange design appeared in the ports, their captains wearing tokens in the shapes of their own lands. Some feared this, but most welcomed it. For the circle had learned. Walls made enemies. Bridges made kin. There were years of hardship. One winter, the White Plague swept from Essos, and half the moot field became a hospital, with Sam's grandchildren and every circle guard tending sick and lost. The archives of Harrenhal recorded every life saved, and when the circle voted to send grain and seed to every coast-stricken, the news traveled in every language, mercy before pride. Once, pirates sacked the arbor, burning the docks and vineyards. The circle guard sailed in blue ships, not to war, but to evacuate, heal, rebuild. Within 3 years, the arbor's wine ran sweeter than ever, and the people called it circle vintage. No realm escaped sorrow, but no realm stood alone. When the riverlands flooded, Ironborn brought stone for new dikes. When Dorne's drought bit, Reachman sent wagons of barley and fruit. No one remembered the taste of war. Some centuries on, it was said there were distant lords plotting a return to kingship, secret meetings in forgotten castles. But when these tales reached the moot, the people laughed. Not in scorn, but in the relief of knowing such power would never again rest in one hand. If ever there was a would-be king, he would find no army, no coin, no ally except memory, and memory was the circle's best defender. The tree at Riverrun, now vast as a small wood, saw the rise and passing of generations. Beneath it, the moot continued, stories told, laws made, quarrels healed, marriages celebrated, children named. A song arose over time, changing every decade, but always echoing the first circle's refrain. Round and round the world we go. No king above, no lord below. Every hand and every heart. A ring, a root, a living start. At the 1000th moot, a girl of 9, dark of hair, light of eyes, stood up to speak. She wore a necklace of old shells, and in her hands was a battered pin, shaped like a direwolf's head. She told the story of a man named John, a wolf who walked with ghosts, and how the world learned that no crown was worth a child's tears, and no throne worth a widow's silence. She spoke the words Bran had once whispered. Mercy or fear, you choose. The circle roared its approval. The rings on every stone marker, worn thin by 10,000 hands, caught the sun, and the tree shed its petals as if blessing the world anew. Somewhere, in the wild wood beyond the north, a white shadow watched. Ravens flew over the wall, and the wind, smelling of snow and summer both, carried with it 1,000 voices, old and new, brave and gentle, foolish and wise, all singing the circle's song. So it was, and so it would be. No end, no beginning, only the road together, a peace made real not by one name, but by all. Generations drifted like the leaves beneath Riverrun's vast tree, the sun wheeling on in bright and steady arcs, as if it too belonged to the circle. The world remade itself year by year, villages swelling into towns, fields shifting as rivers changed their beds, towers climbing higher with each clever mason, and across it all, the slow and stubborn weaving of new tradition over old stone. At the edge of winter, a boy with hair black as midnight and eyes gray as dusk ran barefoot through the Godswood at Winterfell, chasing a shaggy white dog who seemed to flicker from trunk to trunk, just beyond the reach of laughter. The castle was fuller than it had ever been, for every outbuilding had its use. A school, a healer's house, a workshop for the Circle Guard. Rooms where scribes pen new volumes of Sam's ever-growing histories. The kitchens fed not just household and guard, but any traveler who brought news or a tale, or even only a hunger that needed soothing. The North, once hard and insular, became known as the wellspring of roots. Its folk famed for fairness and memory, for keeping the oldest songs alive, for growing new ones with every passing year. Sansa's grandchildren and great-grandchildren tended the weirwoods, but so did the children of Septons, of freedmen, of Ironborn and Summer Islanders and even wildlings. Their lines now mingled and indistinct. The heart tree's branches grew wide and heavy with carved faces, old and new. Some believed they whispered secrets at the turning of the year. Others came simply for the shade and peace. Even now, on cold nights, the bark sometimes glistened red as if sap ran anew. By day, children played in its roots, and by night, old men and women gathered for counsel or comfort, or the retelling of tales. Joan's grave, marked by a ring of river stones and a single grass circlet, renewed every spring by silent hands, became the North's silent promise. There would be no more kings, and no more forgotten dead. But memory lived elsewhere too. At Harrenhal, the college's archivists, now a clan in their own right, tended not only books but the artifacts of 3 centuries of peace. They kept the first charter, ink faded and edges frayed. They displayed the hammer Gendry had wielded at the Circle's founding, Brienne's battered shield, a battered tin cup once used by Sam in the old moot's earliest days, Arya's shell necklace, Tyrion's quill and his last letter to Sansa, read aloud every year by a new voice. Not all was ease or certainty. Floods came sometimes, washing out villages along the Green Fork and carrying whole fields downstream. Once, a fever swept from the Summer Isles northward, and the moot became a hospital for a year. But the people endured, their care for one another sharper than any medicine. In the east, a restless warlord arose, whispering of dragons returned, of a crown to unite the free cities and all the west. But the Circle Guard, now 10,000 strong, with outposts from Sunspear to Skagos, stood ready. They fought not with fire or steel alone, but with trust. The warlord's envoys were welcomed, fed, heard, and after a single moot, their threats softened into trade and their people folded into the wider kin of Westeros. The moot became the greatest marvel of the world. At its heart, the tree at Riverrun stood massive as a keep. Around it sprawled tents and pavilions, market stalls and playhouses. For weeks before and after every gathering, delegates from new realms arrived. The Summer Islands, the Three Sisters, even wandering groups from the eastern deserts. Once, a line of travelers from Yeti made their way to the moot, bringing gifts of gold leaf scrolls and silks as bright as any banner. They listened to the story of the Circle and offered in return a parable of the Long Bridge at Yin, how unity was not made by stone, but by the countless feet that crossed it in trust. Children were the real glory of the moot. The old games of war were replaced by races and riddles, by plays and contests of storytelling, each house and village sending a champion. The winner each year was allowed to carve their name, only their given name, into a great board beneath the tree, beside the Circle's sigil and the stories of protectors past. No lord or lady's title was ever allowed. Only the people mattered. And so, over time, the names became a litany of the land's own children. Mila, Tama, Asha, Bran, Arya, Jon, Eleanor, Samwell, and thousands more. The old magics faded but never died. Sometimes, in the spring, lights would flicker over the moot at midnight, green and blue and violet, swirling above the branches as if to bless the gathering below. No one feared these now. The children called them Circle Lights, and they were said to be the laughter of the old gods or the lingering memory of Bran's distant wanderings. Governance changed with the years. When the moot grew too large for every voice to be heard at once, the realms divided into circles of their own: north, south, islands, rivers, hills, sands, vale, east, and west. Each sent delegates, and each held its own mini-moot before the greater gathering. Laws were crafted by all, reviewed every decade, never fixed, always debated, always growing, always learning. There were failures, harvests poorly planned, a circle guard captain who grew cruel before being voted down and replaced, a merchant's cartel that tried to hoard salt. Each was met with the same tools: open counsel, judgment by the people, and the unceasing memory of the archives. Religion too changed. The faith of the seven, the old gods, the red priests, the drowned men, the singer's way, and 100 small faiths, all found a place at the moot. There was debate and sometimes shouting, but never blood. The circle guard kept a sacred peace. Disputes were judged by elders from every faith, with the verdict delivered only when all agreed. If they did not agree, the matter was left undecided until another year. Most learned to wait, to compromise, to see the seasons turn and to listen. Beyond the sea, the free cities marveled. Kings and queens from distant lands sent envoys to the moot, seeking to learn its ways. The circle's compendium was translated into Valyrian, into the tongue of the Rhoynar, even into distant Yeti's pictograms. Every visitor went home changed. Some tried to make their own circles, with less or more success. But all carried the memory, a realm not built for war, but for peace. Travelers wrote that the roads of Westeros, once haunted by bandits and broken men, were now lined with stone markers, each ringed with the 5 circles and the words, "All are welcome who keep the peace." Pilgrims journeyed from one moot to another, and tales told in Dorne were carried, unbroken, to the northern isles by the next move's turn. And so, as generations turned, the story of Jon Snow and the circle became not myth, but a way of life, no longer a memory of war, but the daily labor of mercy, the mending of fields, the settling of quarrels, the keeping of feast days, the care for the lost and wandering. The idea was not perfect, nothing ever is, but it endured, because it was made and remade by each hand, each voice, every new child grown tall enough to vote, every elder who remembered why the world had once burned and why it must never again. There came a spring, 200 years after the first moot, when a storm of crows gathered above Riverrun, thick and black and crying, as if in warning or in joy. The circle guard watched warily, but no threat came, only a sudden shower of rain, so heavy and warm that children danced naked in it, and the river rose and flooded the fields, leaving them richer than before. That moot, the protector chosen, was a girl from Skagos, whose father had once been outlaw, whose mother was a septa. She stood beneath the tree, lifted the pin of the circle, and swore not by the old gods or the new, but by her own promise. "I will be memory for those who cannot remember. I will be mercy for those who cannot forgive. I will listen, always, before I speak." The applause was thunder. That year, the archives recorded more new stories than any before. That year, the world seemed wider, brighter, fuller of hope. In the wild woods of the far north, a white wolf was sometimes glimpsed at the edge of campfires, his eyes twin embers in the snow. The old still whispered, when the aurora danced, that he watched over them. That as long as the circle endured, so too would his vigil, quiet, patient, never-ending, a shadow at the heart of peace. And beneath the spreading branches at Riverrun, as petals drifted and children traced their names in the earth, the world turned, not with the weight of crowns or fear of dragons, but with the music of voices rising together, a circle unbroken, a promise remade. So the land endured and changed and healed, each generation adding a new ring to the great chain of memory, each heart trusting the next to carry the circle onward, ever into the light. And erased. Time thickened and spun as it always must. The story of the circle unfolding through generations as grass folds over ancient roads, as rivers shift and grow new bends, as trees drop leaves each autumn and bud anew in spring. In every hall from the heights of the Eyrie to the sunlit pavilions of Dorne, the years pressed onward, binding old hurts and new hopes into something gentle and enduring. The children born in those centuries of peace grew into a world more complex, more populous, and yet far more free than even Jon or Sansa or Tyrion could ever have imagined. Beneath Riverrun's vast, ever-widening tree. The moot became a city for a season, a teeming market of tents and wagons, laughter and quarrels, pageantry and debate, as wild and vital as the land itself. The oldest among them remembered a time when all Westeros trembled at the shadow of kings, when the great houses had been like mountains, enduring, silent, often cold. But now, the realm was a garden of voices. The circle's council chambers, carved from polished wood and hung with banners of every color, welcomed hundreds of delegates from dozens of regions, and every morning began with the sharing of bread and fruit, poured wine and sometimes tea from lands east of the sea. In the north, Sansa's descendants watched the seasons turn from the ramparts of Winterfell, but they held no more privilege than any other. The Stark name, once so full of pride and sorrow, became merely one thread among many. The names of other houses, Reed and Dustin, Umber and Mormont, Skagosi, and even distant hill clans, were honored in turn, for each decade saw a new family tending the North's trust, elected by the voice of their neighbors and the weight of their work. The wildlings, once feared as raiders, became the trappers, teachers, and rangers of the deep forests. The North's roads ran bright with the songs of minstrels, the laughter of children, the deep bellows of markets held beneath the open sky. In the Reach, the great Tyrell gardens at Highgarden grew wide as towns, open to all. Roses and apple trees, vines heavy with grapes, new fruits from the east and hardy winter crops from the north. These fed not just the Reach but every region, for the roads that linked the land were busy with wagons, circle guard patrols, and the bands of storytellers and healers who carried news and medicine where it was needed. The once mighty lords of the Reach lived as stewards and teachers now, their ancient vaults repurposed into schools and seed banks. The old hunger for power became a new pride in bounty shared. The Riverlands became a tapestry of bridges and levees, the memory of flood and famine never far from the people's minds. New stonework held back the spring waters, and the moot at Riverrun became both celebration and council. Every great decision was discussed not only by the realm's delegates, but by any who wished to speak. Glassblowers from Lannisport, marshkeepers from the Neck, stevedores from the Isles, old crones from the mountains, all found place, all found voice. Where once the banners of the Tullys flew alone, now the walls bore 1,000 tokens, each shaped by hand, each marking a village or a council, or a child born on a night when the world seemed most gentle. The islands were changed as well. The Ironborn sailed the world, but now, as traders, healers, and explorers. Asha's line survived in stories and songs, but her greatest legacy was the Iron Circle, a school of navigation and diplomacy whose best students served as mediators across Westeros and far beyond. The Arbor's wines and the Isle's salted fish became the stuff of feast and festival, but every ship that sailed the Sunset Sea also carried barrels of seed, crates of books, bundles of news. No port closed its doors. No realm barred its gates. In the Vale, the high halls of the Arryns filled with scholars and children. The Eyrie was still a fortress, but its towers echoed with the songs of the Circle's choirs, and its ancient swordstone court was now a library, open even to the children of shepherds and crofters. The faiths of the land, old and new, imported and born in secret, mingled here. 7 old gods, Rhoynar, red priests, and stranger devotions. Debates were fierce but fair. The valleys below were rich and full, watched over by new-built watchtowers, whose bells rang not for war, but for the calling of the moot, the warning of storms, or simply the changing of the seasons. The Stormlands, for all their wild weather, became the birthplace of inventors and dreamers. Gendry's line did not persist, but his hammer and the first blue circle badge were displayed with pride in every workshop and hall. The great forges produced tools and wagons, windmills and toys, children's fairs in the shadow of storms, and featured flying kites, wooden puzzles, and contests of cleverness. Every year, the Stormlands sent the greatest number of young apprentices to Harrenhal, and some of their wildest became the Circle's greatest leaders, voted for bold ideas and boundless hearts. Dorne, ever proud, held to its own ways, but the Circle transformed it too. Water gardens expanded. Olive groves and date palms lined every road. And peace was maintained not only by the blade, but by the art of the story, the duel of words, the careful tending of memory. Dorne's children traveled the world, and often returned as teachers, healers, dancers, sometimes lovers. Their moots were famous for feasts and music, and every decade, the Dorne moot met separately to choose what council they would send north, a mark of respect and an assertion of their unbroken spirit. The small folk, once only the background of the realm, became its shapers and tellers. Many protectors rose from humble beginnings. A washerwoman from the quiet isle, a fisherman's daughter from the Blackwater, a baker's son from Oldtown. Some moots ended in surprise as the votes broke for one whose only gift was patience or humor or the wisdom of silence. At Harrenhal, the college endured, its towers home to scholars, musicians, old warriors, maesters and healers, travelers from distant lands. Here the great compendium grew, a living record, updated every year, every council, every dispute and every reconciliation, every tale of hope or warning. Songs and proverbs, legal codes and children's stories, all preserved in ink and thread, copied each decade into new volumes and sent on the river to every outpost. No village was so poor or remote that it lacked the circle's law and legend. There were challenges, always. Years of hardship came with storm or drought, or the rise of some would-be tyrant, but never again did a single man or house claim the right to rule all. When a sea captain in the west tried to declare himself king, the moot simply laughed and sent a delegation with bread and salt and wine. When a great fire swept the market at Oldtown, half the realm sent aid. When pirates from the east raided the coasts, the ships of the Circle Guard sailed not to burn or sack, but to defend, rescue, rebuild. The Circle Guard themselves evolved. By the 5th century of peace, their ranks included healers, scribes, craftsmen, gardeners, and singers. Their oath, "I am beside, not above or below," became a nursery rhyme, and even the youngest children could recite the lines as they played. The Circle Guard became less a force of arms and more a symbol of help. Known in the ports for their blue and white cloaks, in the fields for their songs, in the moot for their patience. The moot at Riverrun never lost its wonder. Each generation added new customs. A night of candle floating for those lost. A day of games for children. A festival of bread where loaves from every land were shared. A contest of stories from the year's journey. The tree itself was older now than any living soul, its branches so broad that entire councils could meet beneath its shade during sun or storm. Every moot began with the passing of the circle pin, and every protector ended their term by planting a new sapling, brought from their own home. The ground about the great tree became a living forest, each ring of saplings marking a new era. Sometimes a child found a shell, or a silver token, or an old carved stone among the roots, and these were treasured as much as gold. And always, the story was told. The story of the wolf with no crown, the broken king who gave away his power, the first moot where voices rose together, the hope that peace could last if only all stood together, and the quiet promise, year after year, that mercy would never die so long as one person remembered. Once, in the dark before dawn, a scholar from Harrenhal, wandering among the saplings, found an old woman seated at the foot of the tree, her hair long and silver, her hands thin and gnarled. She looked up and said, "Tell them I am only passing through." Then she smiled and was gone. And where she sat was a single white rose and a circle of polished river stones. The children found it in the morning and wove new tales. That Arya had come home, that the wolf's sister wandered still, that even the oldest tales were never lost if someone remembered. The circle song changed that year, taking on a new refrain. No road is ever ended, no friend is ever lost, no circle is ever broken so long as one heart holds the story. Thus the years and centuries circled on. Storms passed, rivers changed their beds. New lands rose from the sea, and old towers fell. But the circle endured, ever growing, ever renewing. In every hall, every hearth, every hand joined in peace. The world was made anew. And so, beneath the wide branches, beside the slow rivers and the bustling markets. Through laughter and tears and the patient labor of living, the story carried on. An endless wheel, a circle of memory and hope, spun by the dreams of all.